Elon Musk had always been someone who prided himself on thinking outside the box, but today, sitting in the crowded lecture hall at Stanford University, he found himself in an unexpected situation. He wasn't there to give a lecture or to meet with potential investors. No, today, he was just an observer, a man in search of knowledge. Or perhaps, he thought, he was just trying to keep his mind sharp, always pushing himself to absorb new ideas. But what he didn't expect, what caught him completely off guard, was the man standing in front of him. Professor Andrew Blackwell, a renowned figure in the world of physics, was about to do something that would push Musk's buttons in a way he hadn't experienced in years. The lecture hall was packed. The professor stood at the front, chalk in hand, scribbling down equations on the blackboard. Students scribbled furiously in their notebooks, hanging on to every word that came from the professor's mouth. It wasn't an uncommon scene. But what made this lecture different from all the others was the way Professor Blackwell was positioning his arguments. Musk had heard about Professor Blackwell before. The man was well known for his firm stance against organized religion and often used his lectures to promote atheism and dismiss the very idea of a higher power. It was something that Musk, though not overtly religious, had always found somewhat uncomfortable. Sure, Musk wasn't the type to attend church regularly, but he wasn't someone who dismissed the idea of a spiritual world either. His views on religion were more nuanced. He believed in science, technology, and human progress, but he didn't dismiss the possibility of something bigger than the universe itself. However, as Blackwell continued speaking, the air in the room began to change. The professor's tone became sharper, more biting. His voice, usually calm and controlled, had taken on a tone of mockery. "Let's face it," Blackwell said, turning to face the class. "Religion is nothing but a crutch for those too afraid to face the truth. They cling to outdated beliefs because they're scared of the unknown. Scared of the possibility that there is no meaning to life beyond the material world." He paused, letting the words sink in. The idea of a god, of some higher power, is nothing but a myth, a story told to explain the inexplicable. Musk's grip on the armrest of his chair tightened. He hadn't expected such an attack on the very concept of faith. People in the lecture hall shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few students whispered among themselves, others nodded in agreement with the professor. But for Musk, the words stung in a way he didn't anticipate. It wasn't just that Blackwell was dismissing religion, it was the way he was ridiculing it, belittling something that Musk had never considered to be so easily dismissed. He had grown up with a deep respect for the mysteries of the world, the wonders of science and space, but also a sense of reverence for the unknown, for the spiritual. His own mother had often spoken about faith with a quiet, unshakable belief. Musk had inherited a sense of curiosity, a drive to explore, to understand the universe, but that didn't mean he had closed himself off to the possibility of something greater. As Blackwell continued, describing how humanity's advancement in science had made religion obsolete, Musk's mind raced. He thought back to his own childhood, the values he had been taught by his mother, the stories she shared of her own spiritual experiences. Even now, in his busiest moments, he sometimes found solace in the thought that there was something out there, something beyond the stars, beyond the boundaries of human understanding. It wasn't something he often spoke about, but he knew it was there. It was part of what drove him to build companies that could push humanity to the stars, to make life multiplanetary. To Musk, it was not about rejecting the unknown, but embracing it. His chest tightened as Blackwell's voice became louder, more derisive. And let's not forget the absurdity of the concept of God. A being who supposedly created everything, yet allows suffering, pain, and injustice to run rampant in the world. Does anyone truly believe in a God like that? Or are we simply comforting ourselves with fairy tales? Musk's pulse quickened. He felt a flicker of anger rise in him. He had been quiet up until now, sitting in the back, observing. But something about Blackwell's words, something about the professor's dismissive tone about a subject that had always intrigued Musk, pushed him to his breaking point. The room was silent, save for the sound of chalk scraping across the board. Musk glanced around the room, seeing a mix of reactions. Some students were nodding in agreement, some were scribbling down notes, while others were frowning, unsure of how to react. But what Musk saw most clearly was the arrogance in Blackwell's demeanor. He wasn't merely presenting a viewpoint, he was ridiculing anyone who dared to think differently. Musk's thoughts were swirling. This wasn't just a lecture on physics. This was an attack on belief itself, an attack on the very idea of spirituality that had quietly shaped his own understanding of the world. He could feel the anger building up inside him, and for the first time in a long while, Musk found himself struggling to keep his emotions in check. "Does anyone have a question?" Blackwell asked, smirking at the class. "I'm happy to answer." Musk's hand shot up, his heart pounding in his chest. The room turned silent, all eyes on him. He had been quiet for too long. "Yes, Elon Musk," Blackwell said, surprised to see the famous entrepreneur in his class. "What can I do for you?" Musk stood up, his voice steady but firm. "Professor, you've been talking about science and facts, about the certainty of the material world. But how can you be so certain that what we see is all there is? How do you explain the vastness of the universe, the complexity of life, and the beauty of the cosmos, without considering the possibility that someone, created it all? You mock belief, but you fail to address the deeper questions, the ones that go beyond science." Blackwell raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. The class was silent, watching the confrontation unfold. "I'm not mocking belief, Mr. Musk," the professor replied, his voice laced with condescension. "I'm simply pointing out that belief without evidence is a dangerous thing. We don't need fairy tales to explain the world." Musk's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he was tempted to sit down, to let it go. But he couldn't. Not after everything that had been said. "No, you're mocking it," Musk replied. "You're dismissing it as if it's beneath you. But what if, just maybe, there's more to reality than what we can see, touch, or measure? What if science and faith can coexist, each offering its own answer to the mysteries of life?" The room was electric with tension. Blackwell stared at Musk, his face hardening. "Then you're living in a fantasy," the professor snapped. "And I suggest you wake up." Musk's heart raced. He had expected the confrontation to go differently, but the words felt like a slap. But instead of retreating, he stood his ground. This wasn't just about winning an argument, it was about defending something he believed in, something that had shaped his life in ways he hadn't fully realized until now. The class sat in stunned silence, unsure of how to react. The stage had been set for something far bigger than a simple classroom debate. And as Musk took his seat, his mind was already racing. He couldn't let it go. He wouldn't. What was next? Would he walk away, or would he fight for what he believed in? This was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk wasn't someone who often reflected on his past, he was always too busy with the future. But as he sat in that lecture hall, staring at Professor Blackwell, the words from his childhood began to resurface, pushing their way to the forefront of his mind. Musk was no stranger to conflict. In fact, it had been a constant throughout his life. But what he hadn't anticipated was that this particular confrontation would trigger memories of his early years, memories of how he'd been shaped by the conflicting forces of science and spirituality. Musk had been born in Pretoria, South Africa, into a family that could best be described as complex. His father, Errol, was a man of science, logic, and intellect. Errol Musk had a brilliant mind, but he was also an emotionally distant figure, someone who believed that only hard evidence and logic could explain the world around them. Religion, in his eyes, was something for the weak-minded, a mere escape from the cold, hard reality of existence. In contrast, his mother, May Musk, was a woman with a quiet strength, someone who had always encouraged Elon to think for himself and explore the world beyond what he was taught. Though May didn't push him toward any particular faith, her belief in a higher power was clear. She often spoke of the mysteries of life, the inexplicable wonders of the universe, and the importance of faith in navigating the complexities of the world. It was her perspective that had sparked Musk's earliest curiosity about the divine. From a young age, Musk had been taught to question everything, to challenge the world around him and never accept things at face value. But unlike his father, who was steadfast in his dismissal of religion, Musk's curiosity about the concept of God had been more open-ended. It wasn't that he believed in God in the traditional sense, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to life than what could be explained through science alone. He had always been intrigued by the intersection of the known and the unknown, the tangible and the intangible. As a child, Musk had spent hours reading books about space, the stars, and the possibilities of life beyond Earth. His father's cold, scientific worldview often clashed with his own sense of wonder. Errol had often dismissed Musk's questions about the cosmos, telling him that there was no need for fanciful stories or religious beliefs to explain the universe. The universe, Errol would argue, was governed by the laws of physics, nothing more, nothing less. But that didn't stop Musk from dreaming. His mother had encouraged him to explore these dreams, to let his imagination run wild. In fact, May had often told him that there was nothing wrong with believing in something greater, something beyond the realm of science. It was a sentiment that resonated with Musk, though he was still young and trying to make sense of it all. As a teenager, Musk's thoughts about God and religion had become more complicated. He'd read extensively on the subject, from the works of Richard Dawkins to the writings of Albert Einstein, whose quotes on the mysteries of the universe often danced on the edge of spiritual curiosity. Musk had been drawn to the idea that science and spirituality might not be mutually exclusive. The idea of a higher power wasn't something he discarded outright, but he also couldn't ignore the scientific truths that seemed to contradict religious doctrine. This internal tug-of-war had followed Musk throughout his life, and as he grew older, it became clear that his relationship with faith was far more personal than anyone could understand. He didn't talk much about it publicly, not in the way some people wear their beliefs as a badge of honor. For Musk, it was about the private moments of awe and wonder when gazing at the stars, when contemplating the sheer vastness of the universe. It was in these quiet moments that he allowed himself to consider the possibility that there might be a force greater than himself. But for the most part, he kept these thoughts to himself. That was, until now. As Musk sat in the lecture hall, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his upbringing pressing down on him. Here he was, an accomplished entrepreneur, someone who had revolutionized the electric car industry with Tesla and who was pushing humanity to explore Mars with SpaceX. Yet, this professor, this self-assured man standing before him, was mocking something Musk had never fully let go of, the idea of a higher power. Musk had spent years building his companies on the foundation of logic, reason, and a relentless pursuit of progress. But he had never dismissed the spiritual side of life, the side that gave people hope, meaning, and comfort in times of uncertainty. He had seen it in his mother, who had always maintained a quiet but unwavering faith. He had seen it in the eyes of countless people who had reached out to him, telling him how his work had inspired them to believe in the impossible. Yet here he was, confronting a man who seemed to have completely closed off the possibility of anything beyond the material world. "Mr. Musk, do you believe in God?" Professor Blackwell's voice cut through his thoughts, pulling Musk back to the present. The question hung in the air, more of a challenge than a genuine inquiry. Musk didn't answer immediately. His mind was still processing the rush of emotions, memories, and beliefs that had suddenly resurfaced. What was he supposed to say? Should he give in to the professor's mocking tone and simply say he didn't believe in God? Or should he stand up for something he believed was far more complex than either side of the debate had presented? For a moment, Musk considered walking away. He wasn't used to being put on the spot like this. But then, he thought about everything he had built, about the countless people who relied on him to be authentic and to stand firm in his beliefs. He thought about the people who followed him on Twitter, the ones who had supported his vision of a future where humanity would colonize other planets. And he thought about the lessons his mother had taught him about the importance of respecting other people's beliefs, even if they differed from his own. Musk took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. He knew this wasn't just about faith, it was about respect, about defending the right to believe in something beyond science, beyond reason. I believe that the universe is far more complex than we can fully understand, Musk said slowly, his voice steady. I believe in science, I believe in exploration, and I believe in pushing the boundaries of what's possible. But I also believe that there's something beyond the science we've discovered. Whether it's God, a higher power, or something else entirely, I don't have all the answers. But I do know that we don't have the right to dismiss the possibility that there's more to life than what we can measure. The class was silent. Musk's words hung in the air, an uncomfortable tension filling the room. Professor Blackwell didn't respond immediately, but Musk could see the disbelief in his eyes. The professor wasn't used to hearing anyone stand up to him, especially someone like Musk. You're a scientist, Mr. Musk. Don't you think it's time to put these childish notions aside? Blackwell finally said, his voice dripping with condescension. But Musk wasn't backing down. We can be scientists and still have room for wonder, he said quietly, his gaze meeting Blackwell's. Science and faith aren't enemies, they can coexist, if we let them. The silence in the lecture hall was deafening. Elon Musk could feel the weight of every eye in the room on him, the class divided into an invisible battleground. Some students were leaning forward, their attention fixed on the exchange between him and Professor Blackwell. Others seemed uncomfortable, unsure of what to make of the confrontation. Musk was aware that this moment was quickly turning into something more significant than a simple disagreement over faith. It was a clash of ideologies, a battle of worldviews, and he had no intention of backing down. Professor Blackwell's face had hardened, his lips pressed tightly together in a thin line. He hadn't expected someone like Musk to challenge him. He had dismissed the idea of a higher power with ease, cloaking his disdain in intellectual superiority, but Musk's words had pricked at something deeper, something the professor had buried beneath years of rigid rationalism. You talk about the universe as though it has some purpose, Blackwell finally said, his voice cold and cutting. But the universe isn't here for us. It doesn't care about our existence. We are nothing but a speck of dust in the vastness of time and space. There's no grand design. There's no cosmic hand guiding us. There is only the cold, indifferent reality of the universe. Musk's jaw tightened. He had heard similar arguments before, from people who believed that science had all the answers, who were so sure that there was nothing beyond the physical realm that they scoffed at the very notion of spirituality. But what Blackwell had just said felt different. It felt personal. The professor's words hung in the air, taunting Musk's very belief in the possibility of something greater. The coldness in Blackwell's voice only made Musk more determined to stand his ground. You're right about one thing, Musk said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. We are a speck of dust in the grand scheme of things. But that doesn't make our lives meaningless. If anything, the fact that we are so small, so fragile, makes the pursuit of meaning even more important. He paused, letting his words sink in. I believe that even in a universe that doesn't care about us, we have the ability to create meaning, through our actions, through the way we treat each other, through the dreams we chase. Professor Blackwell scoffed. Creating meaning? That's just human arrogance. We're here by chance. Our existence is the result of random events. There's no grand purpose. You're living in a fantasy if you think otherwise. A murmur rippled through the class. Some students were nodding in agreement, while others seemed to be reconsidering their stance. Elon could see the tension in the room building. This wasn't just a debate about religion, it had become a debate about the very nature of life itself. And for Musk, it was a debate he wasn't willing to lose. Maybe it is human arrogance, Musk said, his voice rising slightly. Maybe we're not meant to understand everything. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. We are the only species on this planet that has the ability to ask questions, to seek answers. And yes, maybe our lives are brief in the grand timeline of the universe, but that doesn't mean we can't find purpose in them. Blackwell's expression was a mixture of disbelief and disdain. Purpose? You're grasping at straws. There's no evidence for any of this. It's just wishful thinking. Musk felt a flash of frustration. He knew this conversation wasn't going to end with him convincing Blackwell of anything. This wasn't about logic, it was about something deeper. But he couldn't help himself. The words just kept flowing. Maybe there's no hard evidence, Musk said, leaning forward slightly. But there are things in this world that science can't explain. Things that go beyond equations and formulas. And it's in those things, the mysteries of life, that we find meaning. He looked directly at Blackwell. You may not believe in a higher power, and that's your choice. But don't tell others that their beliefs are meaningless. Don't tell them that the search for something greater is a waste of time. Because that's where real progress comes from, when we reach beyond what we know, when we allow ourselves to dream of the impossible. For a brief moment, the room was silent. The tension in the air was palpable. Musk could feel his heart pounding in his chest, but he didn't look away from Blackwell. This wasn't just an intellectual debate, this was a test of character. And Musk wasn't going to back down. Finally, Blackwell broke the silence, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sorry, Mr. Musk," he said, his tone mocking, "but it seems to me that you're confusing dreams with delusions." Musk didn't flinch. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but I'd rather be delusional in my belief that there's something greater than nothingness than live in a world where everything is just random and purposeless." A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing at one another. Some looked at Musk with curiosity, others with skepticism. But for a few, there was a flicker of something else, something that resembled respect. Musk wasn't just standing up for his beliefs, he was challenging the very narrative that had dominated the lecture hall. And that, in itself, was a victory. Blackwell narrowed his eyes. "You've made your point, Mr. Musk," he said, his voice now colder than ever. "But I assure you, your fantasies won't change the reality we live in. You can dream all you want, but that won't make the universe any less indifferent to your existence." Musk didn't respond. He didn't need to. The exchange was over, but the message had been made. He had stood up for what he believed in, even if it wasn't popular or easy. He had taken on an intellectual giant and refused to back down. As the professor turned back to the chalkboard, the room slowly began to settle. Musk remained standing for a moment longer, his mind buzzing with a mixture of anger, confusion, and exhilaration. He had entered the lecture hall as a mere observer, but now, he was anything but. The world wasn't going to hand him answers, Musk knew that. But that didn't mean he was going to stop asking the questions. He had come to this lecture hoping for a simple exchange of ideas, but what had unfolded was something much larger, a battle of beliefs that had unexpectedly become personal. And Musk knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days following Elon Musk's confrontation with Professor Blackwell were a whirlwind. It had begun as a small, isolated moment in a lecture hall, but now, the echoes of their debate were reverberating through the media, social platforms, and beyond. Musk had long been a public figure, used to the spotlight, but this was different. This wasn't about his companies or groundbreaking innovations, it was about something more personal, something far deeper. It started innocuously enough. A video clip of the heated exchange had been posted online by a student who had attended the lecture. Within hours, it had gone viral. The hashtag Musk vs. Blackwell trended worldwide, as people from all corners of the globe weighed in on the argument. The polarizing debate over science and faith, reason and belief, had captured the imagination of millions. Some sided with Musk, praising his bold defense of spiritual wonder in a world dominated by empirical reasoning. Others, however, rallied behind Professor Blackwell, asserting that Musk's ideas were a dangerous blend of fantasy and delusion. On Twitter, Musk's feed exploded with responses. Some users, mostly his followers, expressed support for his position. They admired his courage in standing up to the rigid, atheistic worldview that Blackwell had espoused. Musk is a visionary not just in tech but in his ability to challenge outdated thinking, one tweet read. Sometimes we need a little faith to drive innovation. But for every tweet in support, there were dozens more that dismissed Musk's views as naive or worse, dangerous. One tweet from a prominent atheist scholar read, "Musk is a brilliant engineer, but his willingness to entertain superstition is unsettling. Science should be based on evidence, not wishful thinking." For days, the controversy raged on, filling Musk's notifications with a mixture of praise, criticism, and everything in between. But what truly shocked him was the vitriol that some people were directing his way. Some went so far as to accuse him of being anti-science, of undermining the rational principles that had guided the technological revolution he had helped shape. It wasn't just online. News outlets picked up the story, with pundits weighing in on the growing debate. Major newspapers like the New York Times and The Guardian ran op-eds that framed the confrontation as a dangerous example of how modern-day thinkers were losing their grip on reason and turning to archaic beliefs. The clash between Musk and Blackwell is a symptom of a larger issue, one article wrote. In an age of technological advancement, should we really be indulging in such fantastical ideas? But the media was only half the battle. The public's reaction to the confrontation had bled into Musk's own professional life. Tesla's stock price dropped by 3% in the aftermath of the debate, a subtle but significant signal that the market was paying attention. Investors were starting to ask questions, questioning whether Musk's personal beliefs could somehow affect the future of Tesla, SpaceX, or other ventures. For someone like Musk, who had always relied on logic and data to make decisions, this was new territory. He had been on the receiving end of criticism before, especially with his bold, sometimes controversial statements, but this felt different. This wasn't about his work, his innovations, or his approach to business. It was about his personal beliefs, something that no amount of engineering or business acumen could defend. Still, Musk was no stranger to controversy. He had faced backlash before for his outspoken views, his unconventional business strategies, and his frequent Twitter provocations. But this felt different. This wasn't just people questioning his approach to business, it was people questioning his very identity, the values that had driven him since childhood. It was at this point that Musk decided he needed to address the growing backlash head-on. He was no stranger to using social media as a platform, and he wasn't going to let the storm pass without a response. On Twitter, he posted a message. Belief in something greater than ourselves is a fundamental part of the human experience. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I believe in exploration, in science, in the unknown, and in the possibility that there is more to the universe than we can see. Faith and reason don't have to be enemies. They can coexist, just as they have throughout history. We need both to move forward. The tweet was met with a flood of reactions. Some hailed it as a powerful defense of human curiosity and spirit. Others mocked him for caving under pressure, accusing him of trying to appease both sides of the debate. But Musk stood by his words. He knew this was bigger than a simple academic debate. This was about the fundamental tension between human curiosity and the search for meaning in a universe that often seemed indifferent to our existence. Behind the scenes, Musk was also dealing with the fallout in a more personal way. His team at SpaceX had been rattled by the controversy. Some engineers, who had always respected Musk for his relentless drive and forward-thinking mentality, were now uncertain about how to approach the issues that had been raised. Was he now questioning the very principles that had made SpaceX such a success? Was this a distraction that could harm the company's future? Musk had always been a leader who pushed the boundaries, someone who valued innovation above all else. But this wasn't just about business. It was about the very idea that had driven his entire career, the idea that humanity could transcend its limitations and reach for the stars. Whether or not he believed in God, he still believed that humanity's potential was boundless. It wasn't just about solving the problems of today, it was about creating a future where anything was possible. In the midst of all this, Musk received an unexpected message. It was from May Musk, his mother. "Elon, I know this is hard right now, but you've always followed your own path. Don't let anyone make you question what you believe. People will always disagree, but that doesn't mean you should stop dreaming. You have a gift, and it's not just in business. It's in the way you see the world." Her words struck a chord with him. He'd always trusted his mother's advice, and in this moment, he realized that she was right. This wasn't about pleasing anyone or avoiding conflict. It was about staying true to himself. His belief in something greater didn't have to make sense to everyone. What mattered was that it made sense to him. As the storm raged on, Musk came to a realization: the controversy surrounding his words wasn't going to disappear. If anything, it was only going to escalate. But rather than retreat into silence, he decided to embrace the moment, to lean into the discomfort, and to use this opportunity to explore the very questions that had shaped him as a person. This was no longer about proving Blackwell wrong or defending himself. It was about starting a conversation about the intersection of science and faith, reason and belief, and the role of curiosity in pushing the boundaries of human potential. For Musk, the debate had only just begun. The weeks following the public clash between Elon Musk and Professor Blackwell were filled with endless debates, media coverage, and a growing sense of urgency. Musk's inbox was flooded with messages, some supportive, others full of scorn. The world had divided itself into two camps, and his actions had ignited something much bigger than he had anticipated. But as the noise and opinions swirled around him, Musk realized one thing: this wasn't just about defending his beliefs or confronting an atheist professor anymore. It was about a personal journey, one that would take him deeper into the unknown than he ever imagined. Elon had always been a man of vision, relentlessly pursuing his dreams of space exploration and technological innovation. But now, he found himself grappling with a different kind of exploration, an internal one. The debate with Blackwell had caused him to reflect on his own beliefs, to question not just the boundaries of technology but the boundaries of the human spirit. Late one evening, as he sat in his office overlooking the lights of SpaceX headquarters, Musk found himself staring out the window, lost in thought. His mind wasn't focused on the rockets or the next Mars mission, it was focused on something much larger, something more intangible. Was there truly something more than what science could explain? Could faith and reason coexist, as he had suggested in his tweet? Or was he merely chasing a fantasy? The sudden ring of his phone broke his reverie. It was a call from one of his closest friends, J.B. Straubel, the former Tesla CTO. "Elon," J.B. said, his voice sounding concerned, "I saw the headlines. I know you've been taking a lot of heat lately. How are you holding up?" Musk sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's been intense, J.B. People are tearing me apart, both for my stance on this debate and for the way I've handled it. I thought I could just have a simple conversation, but this is turning into something I didn't expect." "I know you, man," J.B. said with a chuckle. "You never do anything by halves. But you've got to ask yourself, what's really going on here? Why are people so fired up about this? There's more at play than just your ideas. You're not just fighting for what you believe, you're challenging a system of thought that's been dominant for a long time." Musk paused, considering JB's words. "I think you're right," he said after a beat. "But it's not just the system of thought I'm challenging. It's the very idea that reason and faith can't coexist. I've always believed that humanity's greatest achievements come from curiosity. We've pushed boundaries in science, in technology, and in space exploration because we've dared to ask, what if? But what if the greatest what if is something beyond what science can explain?" JB didn't respond right away. "I think you're onto something, Elon," he said, sounding thoughtful. Maybe it's not just about science and technology. Maybe it's about something deeper, about the human need to find meaning, to understand our place in the universe. It's the reason why we've always looked to the stars. We want to know if there's more out there. We want to know if we matter. The conversation left Musk with much to ponder. JB's words stuck with him, especially the idea that humanity's search for meaning was just as important as the pursuit of knowledge. That night, for the first time since the debate, Musk felt a shift within himself. He had always approached challenges with a mindset that anything was possible, but this wasn't just about overcoming technical hurdles. This was about something that transcended the physical world. The next day, Musk began what would become a series of conversations with some of the greatest thinkers and spiritual leaders of his time. He reached out to philosophers, religious leaders, and spiritual guides. He sought out people from a range of belief systems, determined to understand the intersection between faith, reason, and the human experience. Some of the conversations were profound, others frustrating, but all of them pushed him to rethink everything he had assumed. He spoke with Dr. Francis Collins, a renowned geneticist and Christian who had long championed the idea that science and faith were not mutually exclusive. Collins spoke of his own spiritual journey and the ways in which he found awe in the natural world, even as he explored the deepest mysteries of biology. Then there was the conversation with Deepak Chopra, the spiritual teacher and author, who offered a perspective on the interconnectedness of all things. Chopra spoke of consciousness, the universe's vast intelligence, and the power of human belief to shape reality. Musk was skeptical of some of his ideas, but there was no denying that Chopra's passion for the unknown left an impression on him. But it wasn't just intellectuals Musk sought out. He also spoke to everyday people, members of his own team at SpaceX, friends from different walks of life, and even strangers who had heard of his debate with Blackwell. What he learned from these conversations was staggering. People, it seemed, were just as divided as the pundits online, but more than that, they were desperate for something to believe in, something that would help them make sense of the chaos of the world. Musk found himself repeatedly confronted with the same fundamental question: can science and faith coexist, or are they forever at odds with one another? The answer was elusive, but Musk couldn't shake the feeling that the answer didn't have to be black and white. Maybe it wasn't about finding one truth, but about acknowledging that both the rational and the spiritual had a place in the human experience. The more he thought about it, the more Musk realized that his own journey was no different than the journey humanity had been on for centuries. We were all trying to make sense of the world around us, and in the process, we were shaping our beliefs and our understanding of the universe. The key wasn't to dismiss one in favor of the other, it was to embrace both, to understand that our search for meaning and our search for knowledge were two sides of the same coin. As Musk sat in his office that night, reflecting on all that he had learned, he felt something shift deep inside. The journey he had started on was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And the more he ventured into the unknown, both the scientific and the spiritual, the more he realized that his work wasn't just about creating new technologies. It was about helping humanity take its next great leap forward. The journey to Mars was just one part of the equation. The journey to understanding the mysteries of the universe, and of our own place in it, was just as important. And maybe, just maybe, it was the most important journey of all. Elon Musk's journey into exploring the intersection of science and faith had begun to consume him. He spent countless hours reading books, watching documentaries, and meeting with experts from diverse fields. His mind was constantly spinning with new ideas and revelations, but he couldn't escape the feeling that something deeper was at play. Every conversation seemed to leave him with more questions than answers, but it also sparked a curiosity that he hadn't felt in years. One evening, after a long day of meetings and interviews, Musk sat in his private office at SpaceX headquarters, staring at the vast expanse of the night sky visible from his window. The lights of the city below twinkled like stars themselves, but it was the real stars above that captured his attention. For the first time in a long while, he felt small, insignificant even, but not in a negative way. It was as if he was staring into the infinite, realizing how much there was still to understand. As he reflected on his debates with Professor Blackwell, the conversations he'd had with spiritual leaders, and the philosophical inquiries that had dominated his life recently, a thought crossed his mind: perhaps there was no ultimate answer. Maybe science and faith didn't have to be in conflict because, at their core, they were both attempts to explain the same thing. The human condition. The nature of existence. The universe. Life itself. This new realization didn't make him want to give up on science or technology. In fact, it made him even more determined to push forward with his work in space exploration, AI, and renewable energy. But now, he was approaching his mission with a new perspective. He wanted to do more than just change the world. He wanted to help humanity find its place in the vast unknown of the universe. He wanted people to understand that science and belief could coexist, that they could drive us forward in different, yet complementary ways. It was at this moment, as Musk sat alone in his office, that he received a call that would set the course for the next stage of his journey. It was from one of his most trusted colleagues, Gwynne Shotwell, president of SpaceX. She sounded unusually serious. "Elon, we've got a problem," Gwynne said, her voice tight with urgency. "There's been a massive backlash. We've got press outlets and influencers calling for boycotts, questioning our integrity. Some investors are getting nervous, and the stock is showing some volatility." Musk's chest tightened. He had expected the fallout from his public disagreement with Professor Blackwell to escalate, but this was different. This was no longer just a matter of public opinion, it was affecting his company, his vision, and everything he had worked for. "Tell me exactly what's going on," Musk said, his voice steady but edged with concern. "They're claiming that your views are conflicting with the core values of SpaceX. You're supposed to be leading humanity into the future, and some people are accusing you of holding us back by indulging in these philosophical and theological debates. They think it's going to hurt our image, especially with the Mars mission just around the corner," Gwynne explained. Musk's mind raced. The timing couldn't have been worse. SpaceX was preparing for its most ambitious mission yet, a manned trip to Mars. The company had just secured critical funding and was in the final stages of testing the spacecraft. Now, Musk's personal beliefs were threatening to overshadow everything he had worked for. "I'm not going to let this slow us down," Musk replied firmly, despite the gnawing doubt that had started to creep in. "Tell the team to stay focused. We're not backing down from this. I believe in what we're doing. We've got a bigger mission than just Mars. We're shaping humanity's future." Gwynne's voice softened. "I know you do, Elon. But we need to be careful. We can't afford to alienate people right now. We need their support to get to the next level." Musk hung up the phone, the weight of her words sinking in. The pressure was mounting, and the stakes were higher than ever. It wasn't just his own reputation at risk, it was the future of SpaceX, and the vision of a multiplanetary society that he had spent years building. He could feel the walls closing in. He sat back in his chair, his mind spinning once more. This wasn't just about defending his beliefs, it was about choosing a path. Musk knew that, in order to move forward, he needed to find a way to reconcile his philosophical journey with his professional obligations. He could not afford to let the controversy derail the progress he had made, but he also couldn't ignore the growing realization that his work was, in many ways, bigger than technology alone. In the days that followed, Musk threw himself into his work even harder, attempting to drown out the noise. The countdown to SpaceX's Mars mission continued, and every available resource was dedicated to ensuring its success. But the questions surrounding his views lingered in the back of his mind. He felt the pressure of the world on his shoulders. It wasn't until he had a conversation with May Musk, his mother, that things began to shift again. "Elon," May said one evening, her voice calm and reassuring, "I know you're facing an incredible amount of pressure right now. But remember, you've always known that change is never easy. You're not just building rockets and cars, you're building a future for all of us. And that future, whether it's on Mars or here on Earth, is about more than technology. It's about creating a world where we can all thrive, where we can find meaning in our lives, no matter what we believe. Her words hit him harder than he expected. Musk had always admired his mother's wisdom, but this time, her advice felt more relevant than ever. This was not just a business mission, it was a mission to help humanity find its place in the universe, to help people reach beyond the limitations they had placed on themselves. He realized that, like his personal journey, SpaceX's mission to Mars was about more than just conquering a distant planet. It was about pushing humanity to reach for something greater, something beyond the material, beyond the scientific, beyond the known. He wasn't just trying to make history. He was trying to create a new kind of future. And for that, he would need more than just technology and science. He would need belief. Musk sat back in his chair, feeling a renewed sense of clarity. His path forward had become clear. He would continue to fight for progress, for space exploration, and for the future of humanity. But he would also stand firm in his belief that science and faith didn't have to be enemies. They could, and should, coexist. After all, wasn't that the very spirit that had driven humanity to explore the unknown for centuries? The next phase of his journey was about to begin. As Elon Musk's reflection on the interconnection between science and faith deepened, the debate around his beliefs continued to grow, both inside and outside the confines of his companies. With each passing day, the pressure mounted. The controversy had taken on a life of its own, with social media campaigns amplifying the divide. Musk was now a figurehead not just in technology but in the larger cultural and philosophical battle about the role of religion in modern life. The divide was clear: either you embraced his vision of a future where science and faith coexisted, or you were firmly in the camp that saw his stance as a dangerous regression. Despite the chaos surrounding him, Musk remained undeterred. His focus on his mission, to push the boundaries of human potential and bring humanity to new frontiers, was steadfast. Yet, the toll of the debate on both his personal and professional life was undeniable. The constant headlines and public scrutiny were starting to wear him down, and Musk found himself retreating into his work more than ever before. One evening, as he sat in his study, surrounded by piles of reports and blueprints for SpaceX's Mars mission, the sound of his phone buzzing jolted him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Gwynne Shotwell. "Elon, we need to talk. There's a growing movement among investors, and they're not happy with the direction things are going. They want answers. Now." Musk sighed, rubbing his temples. The weight of the world seemed to press on his shoulders, and he knew that something had to give. It wasn't just the investors he was worried about, he could see the impact the debate was having on his employees at SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink. People were divided. Some saw him as a visionary, others as a misguided idealist. Musk had always prided himself on challenging the status quo, but this time, the challenge felt more personal. The public outcry wasn't just about his professional endeavors anymore, it was about who he was, and what he stood for. Later that evening, he sat down with Gwynne in a conference room at SpaceX headquarters. The tension in the room was palpable, as she leaned over the table, her face etched with concern. "Elon," she began, choosing her words carefully, "we've seen a growing resistance to your personal stance. The investors are starting to question the long-term viability of SpaceX, especially with the public debates escalating. They're worried that your recent views are making SpaceX vulnerable. We need to find a way to address this, or it might affect our funding for Mars and other projects." Musk looked out the window, lost in thought. The stakes were higher than ever. SpaceX wasn't just about rockets, it was about human progress. But progress required unity, and right now, there was no unity. The rift was growing, and with it, the weight of the responsibility was beginning to feel insurmountable. "I've been thinking a lot about this, Gwynne," Musk said, his voice quiet but firm. "I know the world is divided on my beliefs. But I can't back down now. This is bigger than just me or SpaceX. We're at a crossroads as a society. People are searching for meaning in ways that transcend technology, and I think that's where we come in. Our mission isn't just about Mars, it's about showing humanity that there is more to life than what we can see or touch. It's about creating a future that gives people hope. Gwyn looked at him, her expression softening. She had known Elon for years, and she understood his drive better than most. But even she couldn't ignore the growing tension that was surrounding him. She had seen him battle through personal and professional challenges before, but this was different. This was a war of ideas, and right now, the battleground seemed to be his own mind. "I get it, Elon," she said, her voice quiet but filled with empathy. "But there's a balance that we have to find. If we're going to move forward, we need to make sure we're bringing people with us, not pushing them away. Maybe we can take a step back and figure out how to bring these two worlds, science and faith, together in a way that's more accessible. You don't have to choose one or the other. There's a way to bridge the gap." Musk nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. Gwyn was right, he realized. He didn't have to pick a side. Perhaps the answer wasn't about choosing between science and faith, it was about finding a middle ground. There had to be a way to show that both could coexist, without sacrificing one for the other. In the weeks that followed, Musk began to take Gwyn's advice to heart. He worked with a small group of advisors, including some of the spiritual leaders he had met in the past months, to craft a new message, one that could bridge the gap between the divided sides of the debate. He wasn't just going to push for the advancement of technology, he was going to push for the advancement of human consciousness. He would promote a future where people could explore both the unknowns of space and the mysteries of the human soul. It was around this time that Musk decided to host an unprecedented event, an open forum where some of the most influential minds in science, philosophy, and religion would come together to discuss the intersection of technology, faith, and the future of humanity. The event would be streamed live, and Musk hoped that by facilitating an open dialogue, he could bring clarity and understanding to the growing debates surrounding his views. As the day of the forum approached, Musk found himself feeling a strange sense of calm. The chaos of the past few months had taken its toll, but now, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This forum was not just about defending his beliefs, it was about creating a space for others to voice their opinions and explore their own ideas about the future. For the first time in a long while, Musk was ready to face the world head-on, not as a lone crusader, but as a part of something much bigger than himself. The day of the event arrived, and SpaceX's headquarters was buzzing with anticipation. The venue was packed with thinkers, religious leaders, scientists, and media outlets. Musk stood backstage, preparing himself for the most important public appearance of his life. He had no idea what the outcome would be, but he knew this was his chance to shift the conversation, to move beyond the conflict and into a space of collaboration and growth. As he walked onto the stage, the roar of applause was deafening. The world was watching. And for the first time, Elon Musk felt truly ready for what lay ahead. The atmosphere in the venue was electric. SpaceX headquarters, usually a symbol of cutting-edge technology and groundbreaking achievements, had been transformed for an entirely different purpose. Rows of chairs filled the space, with cameras poised to capture every word spoken. The world's eyes were on Elon Musk, not just as a CEO, but as a figure caught in the center of a cultural debate that seemed to transcend the business world. Musk, however, wasn't intimidated. Instead, he felt a sense of purpose, something greater than the pressure of expectations. This was his moment to bridge a gap that many believed was unbridgeable. The event had been months in the making. He had personally reached out to a select group of thinkers, scientists, philosophers, religious leaders, and even critics, hoping to create a space where dialogue could replace division. Elon knew that the future of humanity depended on collaboration, and in the age of technological advancement, it was essential to explore how science and faith could coexist without one overshadowing the other. The stage was set. To his left, a panel of esteemed scientists and engineers, many of whom had worked alongside him at SpaceX and Tesla. To his right, spiritual leaders from various religious backgrounds, each representing a different perspective on faith, existence, and the future. The backdrop of the event was a massive projection screen that showed a stunning image of Mars, with a tagline beneath it, "Exploring the Unknown, Together." As the crowd settled into their seats, the lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room. Elon Musk took a deep breath and stepped to the podium, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just another business presentation. This was a statement. The world needed to hear this, and Musk knew he had to speak from the heart. "Thank you all for being here today," Elon began, his voice steady but filled with passion. "This is an unprecedented gathering, not just of minds, but of hearts. We are here to discuss the future, not just of technology or faith, but of humanity itself. We're at a crossroads. For centuries, science and religion have been seen as two opposing forces, but I believe it's time for that narrative to change." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the air. "Some of you may know that I've recently come under fire for my views on the intersection of science and faith. There's been a lot of debate, a lot of misunderstandings. But I believe that our greatest potential as a species lies in our ability to think beyond the boundaries that we've set for ourselves. And I believe that those boundaries don't have to be defined by science alone or by religion alone. We need both. Together." Musk's words reverberated throughout the room, and he could feel the collective breath of the audience held in anticipation. This was it. The moment that would set the tone for the entire forum. "Today, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to listen. To learn. And to explore how we can come together to push humanity forward," Musk continued, gesturing to the panelists on either side of him. "I've invited some of the brightest minds in both science and spirituality to join me today. We're not here to divide. We're here to unite." As he finished his opening remarks, a ripple of applause spread across the room. The crowd was on edge, eager to see what would unfold next. Elon knew that the conversation ahead wouldn't be easy. But it was necessary. The first speaker was Dr. John Harris, a leading physicist at MIT and one of Musk's longtime collaborators on SpaceX projects. Dr. Harris was known for his groundbreaking work in quantum mechanics and space exploration. He stepped to the microphone with a calm demeanor, his glasses gleaming in the spotlight. "Thank you, Elon," Dr. Harris said, nodding to Musk before addressing the audience. "What we're attempting to do in space exploration is nothing short of miraculous. We're pushing the boundaries of what we know about the universe. But as Elon has rightly pointed out, this journey is not just about rockets and technology. It's about the human spirit. As we seek to explore the stars, we must also ask ourselves, what are we really looking for?" Dr. Harris continued, his voice growing more passionate. "For centuries, we've used science to explain the mysteries of the universe. But we've never stopped asking the bigger questions. What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? These are questions that science alone cannot answer. And yet, we cannot ignore science, for it provides us with the tools to unlock the very secrets of existence." Musk nodded, grateful for Dr. Harris's words. The physicist was speaking to the heart of the issue, the limitations of science in addressing the spiritual and existential questions that so many humans grapple with. Next, a surprise guest, Father Michael O'Malley, a Catholic priest with a deep interest in science, took the stage. Father O'Malley had spent years studying the relationship between faith and reason, and his presence on the panel was a sign that this event would not shy away from tackling difficult topics. "Good evening," Father O'Malley began, his tone measured yet warm. "I have spent much of my life exploring the mysteries of God, the universe, and the human soul. As a priest, my role is not to provide answers, but to guide others in their search for meaning. But in doing so, I've come to realize that science and religion are not as incompatible as many would like to think. The pursuit of knowledge is, in many ways, an act of faith, a faith in the inherent order and beauty of the universe." Father O'Malley's words struck a chord with the audience. He spoke not just from a place of belief, but of understanding, a recognition that science and faith could be two sides of the same coin, each enriching the other. After Father O'Malley, the forum opened up to the audience, and the discussion began to unfold. Questions were asked, some challenging, others thought-provoking. People from all walks of life, scientists, theologians, students, and curious onlookers, shared their perspectives on the delicate dance between science and faith. Throughout the conversation, Elon remained at the center, listening intently, occasionally chiming in with his thoughts, but always encouraging the dialogue to continue. There were moments of tension, where opposing viewpoints clashed, but there were also moments of profound insight, where common ground was found. As the forum drew to a close, Elon felt a sense of accomplishment. This had been the beginning of something much larger, a conversation that needed to happen. He had no illusions that this single event would change the world overnight, but it was a step towards something greater. Perhaps, just as humanity had once looked to the stars for guidance, they would now look to each other, with open minds and open hearts. "Thank you all for being part of this," Elon said, his voice filled with gratitude. "This is just the beginning. We have much more to learn. And as we continue our journey into the unknown, let's do so together. Science and faith are not opposites. They are partners, working in tandem to guide us toward a brighter future." As the crowd erupted into applause, Elon Musk felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, humanity was ready for the next step. And in that moment, he knew that the future was not defined by the divide between science and faith, it was defined by the conversations that could bring them together. The forum had left a lasting impression, not only on those who attended in person but also on the millions who watched the live stream from around the world. The debate had been challenging, emotional, and at times, uncomfortable, but it was necessary. Elon Musk had taken a bold step forward in his mission to unite two seemingly opposing forces, science and faith. Yet, as the dust settled, he was acutely aware that the work was far from over. What had begun as a conversation had now become a movement, and the question on everyone's mind was, what comes next? Back at SpaceX headquarters, Elon sat in his office, gazing out of the large windows that offered a panoramic view of the launch pad. It was a quiet afternoon, the usual buzz of activity tempered by a sense of reflection. For the first time in a long while, Musk felt a sense of clarity, almost as if the pieces of a much larger puzzle were beginning to fall into place. The conversation he had started was only the beginning. He realized now that the real challenge would be creating tangible change, not just in the way people viewed science and faith, but in the way they approached the future itself. The issues he had raised, the need for human connection, the exploration of meaning, and the future of technology, were questions that transcended religion, science, and even politics. They were questions about what it meant to be human. He had made his stance clear during the forum, that he believed humanity needed both science and faith to thrive. Science, with its search for knowledge and its ability to unlock the mysteries of the universe, was essential. But so too was faith, with its capacity to inspire hope, drive purpose, and offer answers to the existential questions that could never be fully explained by science alone. But how could he, one person, no matter how influential, make a real difference? The questions were deep, and the stakes were high. The answer came to him slowly, like a faint whisper in the back of his mind. It wasn't just about bringing science and faith together in a room. It was about creating a new way of thinking, a way of living, that would inspire people to move beyond their differences and towards something greater than themselves. As Musk pondered this new direction, he thought about his work with SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink. These companies were built on the foundation of innovation, exploration, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But what if there was a way to extend that same philosophy to something more personal, to how people lived their lives and connected with each other? Musk was interrupted by a knock at his door. It was Gwynne Shotwell, his longtime collaborator and one of the few people he trusted to offer him honest feedback. She stepped inside, holding a tablet in her hands. "Elon," she began, her tone serious, I think you need to see this. Musk leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Gwyn handed him the tablet, and the screen displayed a news article that had just been published. The headline read, "Elon Musk's vision of faith and science sparks global conversation, but does it have a future?" As Musk scrolled through the article, it became clear that while the forum had sparked an important conversation, many were still skeptical about the long-term viability of Musk's vision. Critics questioned whether such an idealistic approach could truly work in the real world, where corporate interests, competition, and politics often took precedence over lofty ideals. They also pointed out that Musk's personal beliefs, though sincere, might not resonate with everyone, especially those who viewed the divide between science and faith as irreconcilable. "What do you think?" Gwyn asked, breaking Musk's train of thought. Musk set the tablet down, his fingers tapping on the table in a rhythmic motion. He had expected pushback, of course. When you challenge the status quo, you always face resistance. But what concerned him more than the criticisms were the doubts he had about how far this movement could really go. "We've started something," he said quietly. "But I can't help but wonder if people are ready for it. Can we really create change on a scale that matters? Can we get past the division, or will it always hold us back?" Gwyn sat down across from him, her expression thoughtful. "I think you've done something that few people could ever do, Elon. You've opened the door for a new kind of conversation. People are talking about this. You've made it okay to ask the hard questions, questions about life, purpose, and the future. That's huge." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But I also think," she continued, "that it's going to take time. Change like this doesn't happen overnight. But you've made a start. And that's more than most people ever manage to do." Musk nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He had always been impatient with the slow pace of change, but Gwyn was right. The world wasn't going to change in a day. But he had given people permission to think differently, to see that science and faith didn't have to be enemies, but could be partners in shaping the future. As the days passed, Musk and Gwyn began to strategize how they could turn this conversation into something more tangible. They knew they needed to go beyond the philosophical debates and work towards creating real-world solutions that could bridge the divide. There were countless ways to do this, through educational programs, public initiatives, and partnerships with other leaders who shared their vision. But the first step was clear: they needed to continue the conversation. Musk had always prided himself on his ability to envision the future and make it a reality. Now, as he stood on the precipice of something bigger than any rocket launch or electric car, he understood that his mission had evolved. The future of humanity was no longer just about reaching Mars or revolutionizing transportation. It was about helping people reconnect, to themselves, to each other, and to the mysteries of the universe. He made a decision that day. SpaceX's next big project wouldn't just be about rockets, it would be about fostering a new vision for the future. A future where science and faith were not separate entities, but two complementary forces that worked together to guide humanity forward. It wasn't going to be easy. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, both personal and professional. But Elon Musk was no stranger to challenges. And this one, he knew, was the most important of all. As he sat back in his chair, staring out at the launch pad once more, Musk felt a sense of resolve settle over him. The path forward was clear. It would take time, effort, and, most of all, faith. But it was a path worth walking. The days that followed the forum were a whirlwind of activity, with Elon Musk's phone buzzing constantly with messages from all corners of the globe. Journalists wanted interviews, critics were eager to continue their analysis, and supporters, many of whom had been following Musk for years, reached out to express their gratitude for initiating the conversation. The response had been overwhelming, both positive and negative, but for Musk, this was the moment of reckoning. Sitting at his desk late one evening, with the quiet hum of SpaceX in the background, Musk reflected on the enormity of what he had just embarked on. The vision was clear now: the future of humanity required more than just the advancements in technology. It required a rethinking of the way people viewed their purpose in life. Was humanity's purpose purely scientific? Or was there something deeper that couldn't be fully understood through data and equations alone? Elon didn't have all the answers, but he did know that if the world was going to push past its current struggles, its divisions, its fears, it would need to foster a spirit of collaboration. That collaboration would have to involve both the intellect of science and the heart of faith. To help make his vision a reality, Elon knew he needed to reach beyond just a few public figures. He needed a coalition, an alliance of thinkers, creators, and influencers who were willing to embrace the idea that science and faith weren't mutually exclusive, but rather complementary forces in a thriving world. The first step in this larger mission was to start small, gathering individuals who were already open to the idea. Musk reached out to several people he admired, his old friends, mentors, and a handful of influential leaders across various fields. These were people he knew would understand the enormity of the conversation that was unfolding. Together, they would create a network that could steer this growing movement toward action. The first meeting was scheduled at one of Musk's favorite restaurants in Los Angeles, a place known for its minimalist style and quiet ambience. As he walked into the private dining room, he could already see the familiar faces. Gwynne Shotwell was there, as well as several of Musk's closest advisors and colleagues from SpaceX and Tesla, as well as a few new faces from the world of academia and philosophy. "Everyone's here, Elon," Gwynne said, smiling as she greeted him. "Ready to get to work?" Elon smiled back, but there was a tension in his eyes. This was the moment he had been preparing for, the moment when a vision would either become a reality or fade into the background of his other ventures. As they all gathered around the table, Elon stood up to speak. "I think we all know why we're here," Musk began, his voice calm but firm. "This," he motioned to the group and then to the ideas they had been discussing for weeks, "is bigger than all of us. We have an opportunity here to shape the future, not just through the work we're doing with technology, but in how we approach the world's most fundamental questions. How do we balance intellect and spirit? How do we move forward as a society, not divided by science and faith, but united by both?" He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. Gwynne, who knew Elon better than anyone, watched him closely. She knew how much this moment meant to him. Musk's brilliance had always been driven by a desire to challenge the boundaries of what was possible, but now, there was something else driving him. It was a belief that technology and progress could only reach their full potential if they were grounded in something deeper, something that transcended the material world. "We need to start with education," Elon said, looking around the room. "We need to create a new way of thinking that blends science and spirituality. Something that doesn't treat one as superior to the other but finds a way for them to work in harmony." A professor from Stanford, Dr. Emily Reyes, spoke up. She was one of the leading philosophers in the world of ethics and artificial intelligence. "Elon, I've spent much of my career working on ethics in AI, and I can tell you that the future of technology is not just in how we program it or what it can do for us. The true power of AI, or any other technology, will be in how we use it. If we don't have a moral compass to guide us, we risk creating systems that could harm us in ways we can't even imagine yet." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly," he said. "Technology is a tool. But we need to have a framework, an understanding of the human experience that incorporates both the intellectual and the spiritual. How can we move forward into the unknown, whether it's space or artificial intelligence, without a sense of higher purpose? That's what this movement is about. A new framework for the future." Gwynne leaned forward, intrigued by Elon's conviction. "So, how do we start making this vision real?" "We create something that brings together thought leaders from across different domains, science, faith, philosophy, and the arts," Elon said. "A global platform where we can discuss not just the future of technology, but the future of humanity. We can work with schools, universities, and even governments to help foster an understanding of how these two forces, science and faith, can complement each other. We need to show people that it's not about choosing one over the other, it's about finding balance. The group nodded, agreeing with the direction Elon was proposing. They knew it would take time, but they also understood the significance of the movement. It wasn't just about discussing abstract ideas, it was about creating real-world solutions. Their work had to begin now. A few weeks later, a website was launched, the Future Together Initiative. It became a hub for articles, podcasts, videos, and live discussions, all focused on the intersection of science, faith, and humanity. Elon appeared in several of the videos, sharing his personal journey and why he believed this dialogue was so essential for the future of the human race. But as the initiative gained traction, Musk quickly realized that the road ahead was going to be filled with obstacles. As much as he had hoped for widespread acceptance, the pushback was fierce. Critics who had long viewed Musk as a tech billionaire with a singular focus on space travel and electric cars now saw him as a man delving into areas where they felt he had no expertise: spirituality, religion, and morality. On the other hand, some of Musk's most passionate supporters were confused by his new direction. They loved him for his technological achievements but were skeptical of his interest in blending science with faith. The divide between the two factions was growing, and Elon began to wonder if he had made a mistake. But just as doubts began to creep in, he received a message that would change everything: an invitation from the Vatican to speak about his vision for the future and how technology and faith could coexist. It was a powerful gesture, one that Elon had never anticipated, but it made him realize that maybe, just maybe, the world was ready for the change he had been envisioning all along. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The letter arrived on a brisk Tuesday morning, tucked between a stack of mundane emails and business reports. Elon Musk had grown accustomed to unexpected messages, some from potential collaborators, others from fans or critics. But this one was different. The envelope, printed with the Vatican's official seal, carried a weight that far exceeded any business correspondence. He opened it carefully, the elegant paper unfolding like a relic. The contents were brief but powerful. Dear Mr. Musk, we have been following your recent initiatives, particularly your ongoing exploration of the intersection between science, technology, and spirituality. As you know, these are subjects that have profound implications for the future of humanity. The Holy See would like to extend an invitation for you to speak at an upcoming conference on faith, reason, and the future of mankind. We believe that your unique perspective could contribute significantly to a much-needed dialogue about the role of science and technology in the modern world. We hope you will accept our invitation and join us in Rome for this important event. Yours sincerely, His Eminence Cardinal Giovanni Russo. Elon sat back in his chair, holding the letter in his hands. For a moment, he couldn't fully process what he was reading. The Vatican. The very institution he had once thought was worlds apart from his work in the tech industry. Yet here they were, inviting him to speak on the very topic he had dared to address in the most controversial ways. He felt a mix of excitement and disbelief. This was no small invitation. It was an acknowledgement that perhaps, against all odds, his message had started to resonate with people who held immense influence over global thought and policy. Gwynne Shotwell, his trusted advisor and business partner, walked into his office just as he was absorbing the weight of the message. "What's got you so quiet?" she asked, noticing the letter in his hand. Elon glanced up, the excitement in his eyes betraying his usual calm demeanor. "The Vatican just invited me to speak," he said, a half-laugh escaping his lips. "About faith, science, and the future." Gwynne raised an eyebrow. "Wait, you're serious? The Vatican?" "Yes," Elon confirmed, shaking his head in disbelief. "They want me to talk about what I've been saying, the need for a balance between science and faith. Apparently, it's something they believe is worth discussing." For a few seconds, Gwynne stood there in stunned silence. The magnitude of this was clear to her, and she knew that accepting the invitation would mean entering uncharted waters. But she could see the excitement in Elon's eyes, and she knew that he wasn't one to back down from a challenge, especially not one that could change the course of history. "That's incredible," she said finally. "But, what are you going to say?" Elon smiled faintly. "I don't know yet. But I feel like this is exactly what I've been working toward. If there's any place in the world where this conversation could have real impact, it's at the heart of one of the oldest institutions in the world. This could give our movement legitimacy, open the door to an entirely new kind of discourse." Gwyn leaned against the desk, considering his words. "I get that. But you know it's going to stir up a lot of controversy, right? The Vatican's not exactly a bastion of radical thinking. And let's not forget, your critics are going to have a field day with this one. The guy who believes in Mars colonization is now talking about faith and God." Elon chuckled, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, I'm sure the critics will be out in full force. But I think this is the next step. If we're going to change the way people think about the future, we have to start with the institutions that shape their worldview. The Vatican represents billions of people, and if they're willing to engage in this conversation, it means the world is ready for it." The days leading up to the trip to Rome were a blur of preparation. Elon spent hours refining his speech, going over every word, making sure it conveyed not only his thoughts on technology and faith but also the urgency of their combined potential. He wanted to be clear, science and faith weren't opposites, but two sides of the same coin. Without both, humanity would falter. The jet touched down in Rome in the late afternoon, the sprawling cityscape coming into view as the sun dipped low in the sky. A convoy of black cars whisked him from the airport to the Vatican City, where he was to be housed during his stay. Elon looked out of the car window as they passed ancient buildings and cobblestone streets, a stark reminder of the centuries-old history that surrounded him. It felt surreal. Upon arrival, he was escorted through the Vatican's gates and into a private conference room, where he met with several key members of the Church's leadership. Among them was Cardinal Giovanni Russo, the man who had extended the invitation. He was an older gentleman with a kind face and an air of quiet authority. "Mr. Musk," Cardinal Russo said, extending his hand in a firm but gentle gesture. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. We are honored to have you here." "The honor is mine," Elon replied, shaking his hand. "I never imagined this kind of conversation would take place here, but I'm grateful for the opportunity." As they sat down to discuss the upcoming speech, the conversation turned to the heart of the matter, what Musk would actually say. The cardinal listened intently as Elon outlined his vision, explaining that humanity's future depended not just on technological advancements, but also on a new kind of moral and spiritual framework. One that could guide humanity as it ventured into the unknown, whether that was exploring the far reaches of space or confronting the existential challenges of artificial intelligence. Cardinal Russo nodded thoughtfully. "You speak of progress, Mr. Musk, but progress without purpose is a dangerous thing. We must ensure that the future you envision doesn't leave behind the very essence of what makes us human." Elon met his gaze. "I agree. That's why I believe the future needs both intellect and faith. We cannot afford to choose between them. The future is not just about technology. It's about humanity, about how we see ourselves in the universe and what kind of world we want to build." The cardinal smiled. "I think we are beginning to understand one another." The day of the conference arrived, and the Vatican's Grand Hall was filled with leaders from across the globe. From scholars and religious figures to scientists and politicians, the room was packed with people who had dedicated their lives to shaping the future of humanity. Musk stood at the podium, looking out over the sea of faces, some skeptical, some curious, and some hopeful. His speech began simply enough, with a brief recounting of his career, his ventures into space, his work with Tesla and Neuralink, and his quest to make humanity a multiplanetary species. But he quickly transitioned to the heart of his message. Humanity stands at a crossroads, he said, his voice steady but resolute. We've made incredible strides in technology, but we are also facing unprecedented challenges. As we venture into the future, into space, into the realms of artificial intelligence, we need to ask ourselves a very important question: what are we building? And for what purpose? The room fell silent, every eye fixed on Musk. He continued, speaking about the importance of balance between intellect and spirituality, between the pursuit of knowledge and the need for a guiding moral compass. As we look to the future, I believe that science and faith are not opposing forces, he concluded. They are two sides of the same coin. Together, they can give us the tools to understand the world and the wisdom to guide us through it. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience, and as Musk finished his speech, the applause was thunderous. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the audacity of the message, an invitation to think beyond the boundaries of what had been accepted as truth. As Musk stepped down from the podium, he felt a sense of accomplishment, but also the weight of what was still to come. The conversation had just begun. The days after Elon Musk's speech at the Vatican were a whirlwind of attention, both positive and negative. As Musk had anticipated, the controversy stirred up a firestorm across the globe. Media outlets, academics, religious leaders, and tech moguls weighed in on his statements, creating a cacophony of conflicting opinions. While many praised Musk for daring to challenge the divide between science and faith, others criticized him vehemently. Some of his longtime supporters, who admired his work in space and technology, felt disillusioned by what they perceived as a sudden shift in focus. They had followed him for his innovation, not for his philosophical or spiritual views. To them, Musk's newfound focus on faith seemed out of place, perhaps even hypocritical coming from a man known for his rational, data-driven approach. On the other hand, religious critics argued that Musk's attempts to merge technology and faith were naive at best, and dangerous at worst. Some even accused him of trying to play God by thinking that he could balance the two forces. They felt that a man who spoke so much about the power of science and reason should not try to reconcile it with something as intangible and subjective as religion. For Elon, the backlash was not unexpected. He had grown accustomed to criticism over the years, especially as he pursued ambitious projects that were often seen as too outlandish or impossible. But this time, it felt different. This was personal. The ideas he had presented were not just about creating a new product or building a company, they were about reshaping the very way humanity thought about its place in the universe. It was about challenging the foundational beliefs that shaped society. Elon spent the first few days after the speech isolating himself in the quiet of his office, reflecting on the feedback. As much as he'd been prepared for criticism, the intensity of it still stung. He found himself questioning, was he on the right path? Was he pushing the envelope too far? Was the world ready for this conversation, or was he simply ahead of his time? One evening, while flipping through articles and opinion pieces, he received a text from his old friend, Richard Branson, the Virgin Group founder and adventurer. "Hey Elon, just wanted to say that I saw your speech. Big move. You know I've always admired your boldness. Keep going, mate. This is the kind of thing the world needs, even if they don't realize it yet." The message, brief yet encouraging, gave Elon a much-needed boost. Richard was no stranger to pushing boundaries, and if he believed in what Elon was doing, it was a sign that maybe he wasn't alone in his thinking. The next day, Elon decided to take a different approach. Instead of retreating into self-doubt, he would engage with the criticisms directly. He called a meeting with Gwynne Shotwell and a few trusted advisors to discuss the growing backlash. "I've been thinking a lot about the responses we're getting," Elon said as he sat down in his office. "It's clear that the idea of combining science and faith isn't an easy sell. I knew this would be tough, but I didn't expect this much pushback. People are angry. They think I'm overstepping." Gwynne leaned forward, her arms crossed. "Elon, you've always gone against the grain. When you launched Tesla and SpaceX, people thought you were crazy. But look at where we are now. You're changing the conversation, and that's never easy. True, Elon replied, rubbing his chin. But this is different. This isn't just about creating a new product or disrupting an industry. This is about reshaping the fundamental way people view the world. It's not just about science anymore. It's about something deeper, something people hold sacred. Elon's voice faltered for a moment, a rare sign of vulnerability. I've always believed that if humanity is going to thrive, we need to think beyond just the material. The challenges we face, climate change, artificial intelligence, space colonization, they require more than just technical solutions. We need to rethink what it means to be human. But maybe I was naive to think people would just accept that. Or maybe I underestimated how deeply entrenched the divide between science and faith really is. Gwyn watched him carefully. You're not naive, Elon. You're visionary. You've always been about seeing the bigger picture, even when others can't. That's why you're in the position you are now. But remember, change doesn't happen overnight. People resist it because it challenges their worldview, but if you truly believe in this, you have to keep pushing forward. Elon nodded slowly, taking in her words. He had always prided himself on pushing the boundaries of possibility, but this felt different. This felt like it required more than just new technology. It was about changing hearts and minds. And that, he realized, was going to be the most challenging part of the journey. The following week, Elon took some time off from his usual hectic schedule. He traveled to a quiet cabin in the mountains, far from the hustle of Silicon Valley and the constant barrage of opinions. It was here, in the solitude of nature, that he could reflect on the bigger picture. The momentary retreat wasn't just for rest, it was a space for clarity. Sitting on the porch of the cabin, looking out at the vast expanse of forest and mountains, Elon felt the weight of his mission settle on him. The world was evolving at an unprecedented rate, and with it, humanity's challenges were growing more complex. He had spent his life trying to solve problems through technology, but now he saw the importance of addressing the deeper questions about the human spirit and purpose. He thought about his children, XAE-A12 and his other kids, and what kind of world he wanted to leave for them. Would it be a world dominated solely by technology, or would it be one where technology worked hand in hand with compassion, wisdom, and a sense of shared humanity? In that quiet moment, Elon realized that the work he was doing wasn't just about building rockets or self-driving cars. It was about building a future that was truly sustainable, a future where science and faith were not opposing forces, but rather the two pillars that could guide humanity forward. He made a decision. He would double down on his mission. He would continue to challenge the status quo, even if it meant facing more criticism. If there was one thing Elon Musk had learned over the years, it was that true change was never easy. But it was always worth the struggle. With renewed determination, Elon made his way back to his office in Silicon Valley, ready to take the next steps in what he now viewed as the most important project of his life. Elon Musk was back in the whirlwind of his day-to-day responsibilities, but his mind kept drifting back to the moments of clarity he'd experienced during his time away. The quiet mountain cabin had offered him a perspective he hadn't realized he needed, and now, every decision, every conversation seemed to reflect the larger questions he was grappling with. The public backlash to his speech at the Vatican hadn't gone away, it had only intensified. The headlines were relentless: Musk's faith in faith, is it a dangerous detour, tech mogul turns preacher, what's next for SpaceX, can Elon Musk be both a visionary and a believer? But this time, he didn't flinch. He knew that the resistance was a natural part of the process. True transformation, he realized, had always come with disruption. He was no stranger to controversy. His ideas about space exploration, renewable energy, and artificial intelligence had faced harsh criticism over the years, but every time, they had also sparked something bigger, a conversation, a movement, a vision of a future that was bold, optimistic, and, at times, uncomfortable. This moment was no different. It wasn't long before Elon's team reached out with an intriguing new development: a major tech conference in Silicon Valley had extended an invitation for him to speak about his recent remarks on faith and technology. They saw it as an opportunity to open up the conversation to a broader audience, one that was predominantly made up of scientists, innovators, and tech entrepreneurs. Elon was initially hesitant. The conference was known for being a space where thought leaders presented cutting-edge technologies and ideas that were strictly rooted in science and data. He knew that presenting his views on faith again might not be met with enthusiasm in such a setting. But then he thought of something. Perhaps this was exactly the kind of venue where he needed to make his next move. A place where those who had followed his work would be forced to confront the deeper implications of what technology could mean for the human spirit. He agreed to speak. But this time, he didn't want to focus solely on faith. He needed to show the connection between technology and humanity's larger questions. If he was going to continue pushing this new narrative, he had to be strategic. He needed to make his audience understand that science, while incredibly powerful, needed the guiding hand of humanity's moral compass if it was to truly benefit society. The conference was held at the sprawling campus of one of the top tech companies in the world, a space buzzing with the energy of innovators, entrepreneurs, and futurists. The stage was set with sleek, modern design, and the crowd was filled with Silicon Valley's elite. The atmosphere was one of calculated optimism, each person eager to hear about the next big breakthrough. Elon sat in the green room, preparing for his moment. He could hear the hum of conversation outside the door, excited chatter about AI, space exploration, and new software developments. But as he adjusted his tie and reflected on his speech, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to cross an important threshold. He was about to do something that few in the room could even begin to understand. And yet, for some reason, he felt more certain than ever that this was the right thing to do. When it was finally his turn to speak, Elon walked confidently onto the stage. The spotlight hit him, and for a moment, he took in the sea of faces before him, bright minds, eager to hear the next big thing. He knew this was his moment to challenge them. "Thank you for having me," Elon began, his voice steady, his words carefully chosen. "I'm here today to talk not about the next great innovation in tech, but about something deeper. Something that I believe is essential to the future of all that we're building here." The crowd hushed, their attention now entirely on him. This was unusual for a tech conference, where speakers typically dove straight into cutting-edge projects or revolutionary breakthroughs. Elon had already set the tone. "We talk a lot about the future of humanity, about what comes next after AI, after space colonization, after we've mastered all of the technical challenges that stand before us. But what happens when we've solved all of those problems? What kind of people will we be then? Will we have answers to the bigger questions of existence? Will we have answers to why we're here? Will we be better for it?" He paused, letting the weight of the question settle in the room. Technology will not solve the fundamental questions of life. And this is where we, as innovators, need to think differently. I've spent my life pushing the boundaries of technology. And I will continue to do that. But I also believe that we need to think beyond the material. We need to think about who we are, why we're doing what we're doing, and how we're using technology to enhance humanity, not diminish it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Musk could feel the skepticism in the air. For many of them, this was a world they weren't prepared to enter. But he wasn't done. He had prepared this moment carefully, and he wasn't going to back down. Imagine, for a moment, a world where we have conquered all of the material challenges, where space travel is as common as air travel and where AI is more advanced than we ever thought possible. In such a world, will we still have a sense of meaning? Will we still know how to connect with one another on a deep, human level? Elon took a deep breath, knowing this was the critical point of his speech. "This is why I believe that science and faith need to work together. I'm not asking you to abandon reason or data. I'm asking you to consider that there is something greater that binds us all together, a shared purpose, a deeper connection that cannot be defined by the things we build, but by the values we carry." The room was silent for a long moment. It was a silence that felt heavy with the weight of thought. Musk had expected resistance, but this was different. He could feel the tension building. Some people were uneasy, some were intrigued, and others were quietly shaking their heads. Finally, a voice from the back broke the silence. "You're suggesting that we need to bring religion into technology?" It was one of the more prominent figures in AI development, someone who had been vocal about keeping faith and science separate. Elon turned to face the questioner. "I'm not suggesting religion in the way you think. I'm talking about a framework, one that recognizes the value of our shared humanity. It's not about faith in a specific religion, it's about recognizing that there are forces greater than technology that shape who we are." Another voice piped up. "And what about progress? What about efficiency and logic?" Elon's face remained calm. "Progress without humanity is not progress at all. If we lose sight of who we are and what we're meant to achieve as a species, then we risk losing everything." The room went quiet again. And then, slowly, a ripple of applause began to spread across the crowd. It wasn't thunderous, but it was significant. Some in the room understood exactly what Elon was trying to convey. As Elon left the stage, he was greeted by a mixture of reactions. Some people wanted to debate him, others simply wanted to shake his hand and express their appreciation for his boldness. But amidst all the applause, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that the conversation had only just begun. There was still so much more to be said, and many more people who would resist the change he was advocating for. But he was no longer questioning whether he was on the right path. The feedback, both positive and negative, was a clear indication that the world was ready to have this conversation. And he was going to lead it. Elon Musk returned to his routine, but everything had changed. The tech conference had been a pivotal moment for him. The speech, despite its controversial nature, had opened a door to an entirely new way of thinking, both for him and for the tech world around him. The conversation about faith, technology, and humanity wasn't just one he needed to have, it was one the world needed to hear. But just as quickly as the words left his mouth, they began to create a ripple effect. In the days that followed, his inbox was flooded with responses. There were dozens of messages from some of the most influential thinkers in the world, scientists, philosophers, and religious leaders alike. But most notably, one letter stood out among the rest. It was from a professor at Stanford University, a man whose name was synonymous with artificial intelligence research, someone whose work Elon had followed closely. His name was Dr. Alexander Grant, a brilliant AI expert who had made significant advancements in machine learning over the years. He was also well known for his outspoken views on atheism and the idea that technology, in its purest form, could stand alone without any need for religious or spiritual context. The letter was succinct but direct. "Elon, I think you've gone too far. Technology has no place in religion, and religion has no place in technology. We cannot allow the two to merge. You risk making everything we've built meaningless." At first, Elon felt a twinge of frustration. Here was one of the brightest minds in the field of AI, and yet, he couldn't see the bigger picture that Elon had been trying to convey. But then, after a moment of reflection, Elon realized that the letter wasn't necessarily a rejection, it was a challenge. Dr. Grant wasn't dismissing him outright, he was inviting him to explain himself further. The conversation, it seemed, was far from over. A week after the conference, Elon was invited to appear on a live debate panel at an upcoming symposium in New York. The event was set to bring together some of the brightest minds in science, philosophy, and religion to discuss the intersection of technology and faith. Among the panelists would be Dr. Alexander Grant, the same professor who had sent Elon the critical letter. It was a golden opportunity, a chance to sit down with one of the most vocal critics of his views and engage in a dialogue that would force both of them to examine their own beliefs and assumptions. Elon didn't hesitate. He accepted the invitation. The day of the debate, the atmosphere in the Grand Hall was electric. The room was packed with attendees from all walks of life, tech enthusiasts, philosophers, religious scholars, and the media. As Elon took his seat at the table, he glanced across to where Dr. Grant sat. The professor was preparing his notes, looking every bit the part of the no-nonsense academic he was known to be. There was a sense of tension between them that was palpable. The moderator, a well-known journalist from the New York Times, opened the discussion with a simple question: "Gentlemen, can technology and faith coexist?" "Elon, you've spoken about this in your recent speeches. What's your perspective?" Elon leaned forward, his expression calm but intense. "I believe that technology and faith are not opposing forces, they can and should work together. Technology, for all of its potential, is neutral. It's a tool. It's what we do with it that matters. And if we're to use it in a way that improves humanity, we need to anchor it in something greater than ourselves." There was an audible murmur in the room, and some members of the audience exchanged glances. Elon's words had a powerful resonance. But then, Dr. Grant spoke, his voice firm and measured. "Elon, with all due respect, your premise is flawed. Technology is not about the greater good or some abstract idea of a higher power. It's about progress, efficiency, and understanding the universe. Religion, faith, is a distraction. It's subjective, emotional, and based on belief, not empirical evidence. You cannot build the future by looking backward." Elon's face remained neutral, but inside, he knew this was where the real conversation would begin. He couldn't let Dr. Grant's words go unchallenged. "Dr. Grant," Elon responded, "I agree that technology is about progress, efficiency, and understanding the universe. But those are all objectives. They don't give us a direction. Without values, without a moral compass, progress can lead us astray. Look at the history of our species. Our greatest achievements came when we united science and faith, when we worked together to build something greater than just technology, something that served humanity, not just our immediate needs." The crowd seemed to shift in their seats. Elon's words were stirring, but there was a noticeable division in the room. Some nodded in agreement, while others remained skeptical. Dr. Grant countered quickly. "I'm not advocating for an abandonment of morality, Elon. But I am saying that the future of technology cannot and should not be tethered to religion. We need to focus on reason, logic, and evidence. Faith doesn't have a place in this conversation." Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind working quickly. "Faith is not a place, Dr. Grant. It's a lens through which we view the world. It's about understanding the bigger picture, about recognizing that science isn't the only force that drives us. It's about the collective human experience. Our history isn't just built on facts and figures, it's built on our beliefs, our desires, our dreams. And those things matter." The debate continued, but the tension in the room was palpable. For every argument Dr. Grant made in favor of pure logic and reason, Elon countered with examples of how faith, whether religious or secular, had shaped the world in profound ways. It wasn't about faith in a specific deity, it was about faith in humanity's potential and purpose. It was about believing that the future could be better, that progress could serve something greater than just technological advancement. The moderator intervened at several points to allow each side to speak, but it was clear that the debate was becoming less about arguing facts and more about challenging the underlying philosophies that governed each man's worldview. And then, at the height of the discussion, Dr. Grant made an unexpected admission. "You know, Elon, I'll admit that I hadn't thought about it quite like that. Maybe there is something to what you're saying. I still don't believe in mixing religion and science, but perhaps there's a way to create a framework where technology can be guided by values without necessarily invoking religious dogma." The audience sat in stunned silence. It was a significant moment, a breakthrough. Dr. Grant, long a critic of the very idea of integrating faith and technology, had acknowledged that there might be a middle ground. Elon smiled, but only slightly. He knew that this was just the beginning. The debate ended with a renewed sense of respect between the two men. They had not agreed on everything, but they had opened the door to a more nuanced conversation about the future of humanity and technology. For Elon, the event was a pivotal moment. It wasn't just about changing minds, it was about starting a conversation that needed to happen. As the evening drew to a close, Elon reflected on what had transpired. He hadn't convinced Dr. Grant to become a believer, and he hadn't forced anyone in the room to accept his views. But he had done something more important: he had made people think. He had created the space for a new kind of dialogue, a dialogue that would continue to shape the future. In the weeks following the debate, the conversation surrounding Elon Musk's views on the relationship between technology and faith began to escalate. The media coverage continued to swirl, with some applauding his bold stance and others sharply criticizing him for trying to bridge two seemingly incompatible worlds. But as Elon spent more time reflecting on the event, he couldn't shake the sense that this was just the beginning of something larger, a movement that could reshape the way humanity thought about its future. He knew that the debate with Dr. Grant had opened a crucial dialogue, but it hadn't fully resolved the core issue, the divide between logic and belief, reason and faith. In many ways, this divide was at the heart of the human experience. It was an ongoing struggle between the desire to understand the world through data and science and the need to find meaning through something greater than ourselves. This realization pushed Elon to think deeper about the implications of technology on society. It wasn't just about the tools we created, but about the way those tools were shaping our lives and our identities. Could humanity truly move forward in a meaningful way without acknowledging the spiritual dimension of existence? To work through his thoughts, Elon sought out a quiet evening with his brother Kimball, who had always been a grounding force in his life. Kimball had a different approach to life, one that was more rooted in family, community, and spirituality. Elon admired his brother's ability to balance his professional achievements with a deep sense of care for the world around him. They sat at Kimball's home in the sprawling countryside, a place where Elon could escape the constant buzz of Silicon Valley. The calm, open space provided the perfect backdrop for a conversation that Elon had been putting off for weeks. "Kimball, I've been thinking a lot about the future," Elon began, looking out over the rolling hills. "About what we're creating, and how it fits into the bigger picture of what it means to be human." Kimball raised an eyebrow, sensing that his brother had more on his mind than just another ambitious business venture. "You've always been someone who thinks about the future, Elon," Kimball said. "But what's bothering you now?" Elon sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It's this divide between faith and technology. I think the world is missing something crucial, the deeper connection between the two. We've created incredible things, but are we using them for the right reasons? Are we using them to enhance humanity or just to expand our own reach?" Kimball listened intently, nodding. He knew that Elon had always been driven by a desire to push the boundaries of what was possible, but this was different. This wasn't just about building companies or reaching Mars, this was about the purpose behind it all. "You know, I've always believed that we need to find a balance," Kimball said. "Technology can help us accomplish amazing things, but it can also isolate us from the things that matter most: family, love, community, and yes, faith. The question is, how do we bring those things together in a way that doesn't just make us more efficient, but makes us more human?" Elon thought for a moment. "I've been thinking about that a lot. The reality is, we're at a crossroads. The next phase of our evolution as a species will be defined by the choices we make now. We have the power to create technologies that could fundamentally change life as we know it. But if we don't have the wisdom to guide those technologies, what's the point?" Kimball's eyes softened. "You've always been about solving big problems, Elon. But don't forget, solving the human problem is just as important as solving the technological one. Maybe it's time for all of us to stop and ask ourselves what kind of world we want to build, not just what we can build." Elon nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. His brother's words, simple but profound, echoed in his mind. It wasn't just about having the answers, it was about asking the right questions. A few days later, Elon found himself once again standing in front of a room full of people, this time at a private event in New York, addressing a group of investors, academics, and futurists. The focus of the event was on the future of artificial intelligence, but Elon's mind was still preoccupied with the philosophical questions that had arisen during his debate with Dr. Grant. After a brief introduction, Elon stood at the podium, addressing the crowd. He could feel the familiar mix of nerves and excitement in his chest as he prepared to share something far more personal than anything he had said before. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, when we talk about the future, we often focus on the technological advancements that are within our reach, space exploration, renewable energy. These are all critical, but I believe we're missing a fundamental piece of the puzzle. We cannot continue to push forward without understanding the moral and spiritual implications of what we're creating. If we lose sight of who we are and why we're doing what we're doing, then we risk creating a future where technology rules over humanity, rather than serving it. The audience sat in rapt attention. For some, Elon's words were a challenge, an uncomfortable notion that pushed against the grain of the rational, data-driven world they had built. But for others, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that technology needed to be tethered to something deeper than algorithms and systems. As we continue to innovate, we must ask ourselves, how do we want to shape the future? What kind of legacy do we want to leave? Our creations have the power to heal, to connect, to transform, but only if we use them with wisdom, humility, and a commitment to the greater good. The room fell silent. Elon could sense the shift in the energy around him. It was subtle, but it was there, a growing sense of understanding, a collective recognition that the conversation needed to move beyond the limits of logic and reason. As Elon continued to speak, he realized that this wasn't just about presenting his own views, it was about sparking a movement. There were countless people in the world who had been wrestling with the same questions, people who felt disconnected from the tech-driven future being built around them. He knew that if he could continue to speak openly about the need for a more holistic vision, one that integrated faith, humanity, and technology, he might just be able to inspire others to join him. By the end of the event, the room was buzzing. Conversations were happening everywhere, people were excited, curious, and even a little apprehensive about what Elon had said. But most importantly, they were thinking. They were grappling with the questions that had long been dismissed in the rush toward progress. And as the night drew to a close, Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure, the conversation about the future had just begun. And he would be there, leading the charge, until humanity found a way to truly balance the technological with the spiritual. As the weeks turned into months, the ripple effect of Elon Musk's speech and the subsequent debate continued to grow. His message, that technology needed to be anchored in something greater than just logic and progress, resonated across the globe. The media, both traditional and social, buzzed with discussions, while think tanks, universities, and religious organizations began to convene to consider the implications of his views. At first, Elon had expected the usual response, backlash from the tech world, skepticism from the scientific community, and curiosity from those interested in the intersection of faith and technology. But what he hadn't anticipated was the sheer volume of positive feedback he would receive from people who felt alienated by the rapid pace of technological change. People began to reach out to him from all corners of the world, scientists, philosophers, religious leaders, and everyday individuals who had been struggling with the same existential questions Elon had posed. There was a growing sense that the world had been moving too fast, that technology had outpaced humanity's ability to understand and control its impact. Many felt that the deep connection between human values and the tools they created had been severed, leaving a vacuum of meaning. One morning, Elon found himself sitting at a conference table in his office at Tesla, surrounded by some of his closest advisors. The conversation was supposed to be about the company's next big breakthrough in electric vehicle technology, but his mind kept drifting back to the ongoing discussions surrounding his views on the future of technology. "Elon, your speech has done something extraordinary," said one of his senior advisors. We're seeing a shift in public perception. People are starting to look at the larger picture of what we're building. But there's a catch: many tech leaders are wary. They see your message as a potential distraction from the progress we're trying to make. Elon nodded. I expected that. Change isn't easy, especially when it challenges the status quo. But I believe the real danger lies in continuing to push forward without considering the bigger implications of what we're doing. We have the power to create incredible things, but we also have the responsibility to make sure those things are guiding us toward a better future, not just a more efficient one. It's not just tech leaders who are wary, and continued. Some of the most influential academics and religious leaders are divided on the issue as well. Some support you, but others think you're trying to merge two fundamentally incompatible worlds. It's creating a philosophical divide. Elon leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. He had expected resistance, but this was different. This wasn't just about whether his ideas were practical, it was about whether they could be integrated into the world's current mindset. Could faith and technology coexist without undermining the integrity of either? In the face of growing polarization, Elon knew he had to do something more than just speak about these issues. He needed to take action. So, he began organizing a series of global roundtable discussions, inviting thought leaders from all fields, technology, philosophy, religion, and ethics, to come together and collaborate on finding a new path forward. He called the initiative the Humanity and Technology Project. The first meeting took place in San Francisco, in the heart of Silicon Valley. The gathering was small but diverse. Attendees included AI researchers, theologians, ethicists, and futurists. Elon's goal was not to convince everyone to agree with him, but to foster a dialogue that would allow them to find common ground. The conversation began with a discussion of the ethical implications of AI. Some argued that AI should be developed with strict guidelines to ensure that it serves humanity, while others argued that such restrictions could stifle innovation. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that there was a deep tension between those who saw technology as a force for human progress and those who feared it could be misused. But then, a young philosopher named Clara, who had recently published a paper on the role of spirituality in technology, spoke up. What if the answer isn't about regulation or progress alone, she asked. What if we need to consider the purpose of technology in relation to human flourishing, not just economic or scientific achievement? Elon sat up straighter, intrigued by Clara's perspective. What do you mean by human flourishing? He asked. Clara smiled. I mean that technology should not just serve us, it should help us become more fully human. It should help us grow in our capacity for empathy, creativity, and connection. If we're only using technology to increase efficiency, then we've lost sight of the bigger picture. We need to ask ourselves, how do these tools help us live better lives, not just faster lives? The room fell quiet as her words sank in. Elon found himself reflecting on her statement. Could technology really help humanity become more empathetic, more connected? He had always believed that technology was a tool for progress, but Clara's argument gave him pause. Perhaps the true value of technology lay not in its ability to accelerate change, but in its capacity to foster a deeper sense of connection and understanding among people. The conversation continued for hours, with each participant contributing their own insights and concerns. By the end of the meeting, there was a sense of cautious optimism in the room. It was clear that the road ahead would not be easy, but there was a shared understanding that technology could not continue to evolve in isolation from human values. As the Humanity and Technology Project gained traction, Elon found that his message was slowly gaining more acceptance. The roundtable discussions spread to other cities, New York, London, Tokyo, and even Nairobi, where people from different cultures and backgrounds joined the conversation. It wasn't just a philosophical debate anymore, it was a movement. What began as a challenging and polarizing conversation was evolving into something more profound, a global dialogue about what it means to be human in an age of rapidly advancing technology. As more and more people engaged with the project, it became clear that the divide between technology and faith was not insurmountable. The key was to find a way to integrate both, acknowledging the importance of reason, progress, and data, while also recognizing the need for values, empathy, and purpose. At the same time, Elon's views began to gain broader acceptance within the tech community. While some of his peers still disagreed with him, many saw the value in his vision. They recognized that the future of technology could not be shaped solely by profit or efficiency, it had to be guided by a sense of responsibility toward humanity and the planet. Back at Tesla and SpaceX, Elon wasted no time in pushing forward with his vision. He assembled a group of like-minded individuals from his companies, engineers, thinkers, and visionaries, who were ready to take on the task of integrating these new values into their work. It wasn't just about creating the best electric car or the most advanced rocket, it was about asking the deeper questions: how could they shape the future in a way that would benefit all of humanity? How could they ensure that their innovations were part of a greater narrative, one that valued human well-being, empathy, and connection? At Tesla, the focus shifted beyond just environmental sustainability. Elon wanted to ensure that the company's products weren't merely efficient, they needed to enhance the quality of life. He tasked his team with considering the ethical implications of every new product, from how they impacted the environment to how they could improve social mobility and equity. At SpaceX, the goal of colonizing Mars took on a new layer of significance. While the dream of making humanity a multiplanetary species had always been about survival, Elon now saw it as a way to ensure the long-term survival of human values. If humanity was going to reach for the stars, it needed to carry with it a sense of responsibility, not just ambition. These efforts were met with mixed reactions. Some employees were energized by the new focus on purpose, excited to contribute to something larger than just product development. But others, particularly those who had joined these companies for their groundbreaking technological prowess, found the philosophical shift challenging. They had always been motivated by the desire to push boundaries, but now, they had to grapple with the question of whether pushing boundaries was enough if those boundaries didn't lead to a more humane, ethical future. As the movement gained momentum, Elon began to recognize that true change would require a rethinking of how society prepared the next generation of innovators and leaders. The traditional education system, he realized, was not equipping students to deal with the profound ethical and existential questions that arose from living in a world shaped by rapid technological advancements. To address this, he teamed up with educators and futurists to create a new initiative, an educational platform that would train young people not only in the sciences and technology but also in philosophy, ethics, and the humanities. It was a bold idea, an attempt to bridge the gap between logic and belief in a way that could prepare the next generation for the challenges and opportunities of the future. Months later, as Elon stood at the podium of an international summit in Geneva, addressing a crowd of thousands, he realized just how far the conversation had come. The event was a culmination of the Humanity and Technology Project's work, bringing together leaders from all over the world to discuss the future of technology and its relationship to human values. Elon, your initiative has sparked something profound, said one of the event organizers, a prominent ethicist named Dr. Mariana Hargrove. This isn't just about merging faith and technology, it's about creating a vision for the future where technology serves humanity's deepest aspirations. Elon nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had never imagined that his speech at the tech conference would lead to such a global movement. But as he looked out over the crowd, he realized that the conversation was no longer just about him. It was about all of them, the people who had come together to shape a future that was more than just about progress. It was about purpose. The global summit in Geneva had been a turning point. Elon Musk felt the palpable shift in the room, the sense of collective purpose, and the awareness that humanity had reached an inflection point in its relationship with technology. The conversation, once dominated by efficiency, speed, and economic growth, was now evolving into one about meaning, ethics, and the responsibility of innovation. He had long been driven by a vision of the future where humanity transcended its limitations, but now, he began to see a clearer path forward, a path that required more than just technological breakthroughs. It demanded a deep commitment to values, humanity, and shared purpose. As he boarded the plane back to California, Elon reflected on the powerful discussions that had taken place in Geneva. The room had been filled with people from every corner of the globe, representing different cultures, beliefs, and perspectives, but there had been one common thread, a recognition that technology, when applied with wisdom and humanity, could unlock the potential for a more fulfilling and equitable future. The summit had also generated a wave of media attention, fueling even more debate. Headlines across the world praised Elon for his ability to bridge seemingly contradictory worlds, science and faith, logic and spirituality. But there were also critics, those who saw his message as an impractical idealism that could stifle progress. Yet, despite the polarizing opinions, one thing was clear: the conversation was no longer just about technology, it was about purpose. This platform, which came to be known as the Future Academy, offered interdisciplinary courses that combined cutting-edge technology with deep philosophical inquiry. Students were encouraged to think critically about how technology impacted society and how they could shape the future in a way that was both innovative and morally responsible. While many were excited about this initiative, some were skeptical. The tech industry had long focused on skills and results, and the idea of blending philosophy with engineering seemed too abstract. Yet, Elon believed that the future needed thinkers who could balance the tangible with the intangible, who could create technologies that not only solved problems but also answered deeper questions about what it meant to be human. As the years passed, the movement grew stronger, but it wasn't without its challenges. Elon and his team faced resistance from both the tech industry and religious communities. Some saw Elon's vision as an unnecessary complication, an attempt to merge two fundamentally incompatible worlds. Others accused him of being naive, believing that a greater purpose could be seamlessly integrated into a world driven by data and progress. Elon himself, ever the visionary, found himself at a crossroads. The more he pushed for his vision of a future where technology and faith coexisted, the more he questioned whether he had the right answers. Was he pushing the world in the right direction? Was there a way to reconcile the opposing forces that seemed to be pulling at the fabric of society? Late one night, as he sat alone in his office overlooking the sprawling Tesla factory, Elon found himself reflecting on the conversations he had had over the years, conversations with scientists, philosophers, theologians, and ordinary people. He had come to realize that the question wasn't about whether faith and technology could coexist. It was about how they could coexist in a way that honored both the advancements of science and the timeless wisdom of spirituality. Through this journey, Elon experienced a transformation of his own. He had always been known for his relentless pursuit of progress, for his drive to make the impossible possible. But now, he began to see that progress wasn't just about moving forward, it was about ensuring that humanity's collective journey was guided by a sense of purpose. He started to spend more time with his family, understanding the importance of connection and love in ways he had never fully appreciated before. He began to attend spiritual gatherings and engage in conversations with people of different faiths, seeking to understand how their beliefs shaped their view of the world. These experiences, while deeply personal, also informed his work. He realized that the future wasn't just about building the next great technology, it was about building a future where humanity thrived, where empathy, purpose, and connection were as important as efficiency and innovation. By the time Elon stood before the world at the next global summit, he was a changed man. The message he shared was not just about technology, it was about humanity's place in the cosmos and the ethical responsibilities that came with the power to shape the future. The future we're building isn't just about new gadgets and faster cars, he said, his voice steady. It's about asking ourselves, what kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of world do we want to leave for future generations? We have the power to create a future that is not only technologically advanced but also deeply compassionate, equitable, and connected. It's not just about what we can do, it's about what we should do. The audience sat in silence, reflecting on his words. There were no easy answers, but there was a sense of hope, a belief that the future was still unwritten, and that humanity had the power to shape it for the better. As the momentum of the movement grew, so did its impact. What started as a philosophical debate between technology and faith had evolved into a global conversation on ethics, values, and the very nature of progress. But with every step forward, there were unforeseen consequences, challenges that Elon hadn't anticipated, even with all his planning. The rise of the Humanity and Technology Project sparked an unexpected wave of innovation, but not all of it was aligned with Elon's vision. As more companies and individuals jumped on the bandwagon, trying to capitalize on the idea of blending purpose with progress, some took the concept and twisted it into a lucrative trend. Entrepreneurs and corporations who had once been primarily driven by profit began marketing their products and services as ethically sound, without any genuine commitment to the underlying values Elon had championed. It was a perversion of his vision. Elon became aware of this when his team presented him with a report detailing how several tech companies, including some that had initially been hostile to his ideas, were now adopting the language of his movement without actually integrating it into their business models. Instead of genuine efforts to build technology for the greater good, these companies were selling purpose-driven products that had no real impact, merely profiting off of public interest in the cause. The irony wasn't lost on him. The very movement he had started to challenge the corporate greed of Silicon Valley was being commodified. Elon had always known that the forces of profit and efficiency would try to co-opt any movement for their gain, but seeing it happen so quickly was a wake-up call. The first time Elon confronted this issue head-on was at a tech conference in New York, where he was invited to speak about the future of technology. A panel discussion had been organized, and Elon was seated alongside several CEOs who were now aligning themselves with the values of the Humanity and Technology Project. However, it became clear that their understanding of these values was shallow at best. As the panel began, one of the CEOs, Mark Stevens from a popular tech conglomerate, spoke with passion about the importance of integrating purpose into their products. "We believe that our new AI-driven system is not only more efficient but also designed with humanity's best interests in mind," he said confidently. "We're proud to be a part of this movement, where technology meets spirituality." Elon raised an eyebrow. Mark Stevens was known for his ruthless business practices and had previously dismissed the very idea of ethics in tech. Now, he was using the language of the movement, but something about his tone made Elon uncomfortable. It felt disingenuous. After a few more statements from other panelists, Elon couldn't take it any longer. He stood up, interrupting the discussion. "I have to stop you there," he said, his voice calm but firm. "What you're saying sounds good in theory, but it's not what's actually happening. You're using the language of purpose to sell products, but what you're really doing is selling more control, more surveillance, and more manipulation." The room went silent. Mark Stevens shot him a glance, clearly irritated. "Elon, what are you talking about? We're working hard to integrate ethical practices into our business." Elon's eyes narrowed. "Ethical practices? You're building products that track every move of every person who buys them, and you think that's ethical? You're not integrating purpose, you're commodifying it. And that's a problem, because you're muddying the waters for everyone who's genuinely trying to build a better future." The tension in the room was palpable. Some of the audience members looked uncomfortable, others seemed uncertain, but no one dared speak up. Elon's words hung in the air like a challenge. The incident at the New York conference set off a chain reaction. The media was quick to pick up on the tension, with some outlets framing Elon's outburst as an act of moral superiority, while others applauded him for holding tech giants accountable. Regardless of the interpretation, it was clear that this confrontation had ignited something larger than anyone anticipated. In the days that followed, there was a growing backlash, this time not from religious or philosophical communities, but from within the tech industry itself. CEOs who had once lauded Elon's efforts began to publicly distance themselves from his ideas. Some claimed that he had become too idealistic and that his pursuit of a purpose-driven future was holding back progress. They argued that technology should be driven by market demand, not a moral compass. Elon was well aware of the irony. He had been an outsider in the world of tech for years, his vision often clashing with the status quo. Now, the same people who had been his allies in the early days of the movement were questioning his commitment to progress. They accused him of trying to impose an ideology on the industry that didn't belong. As the weeks went by, Elon's inbox flooded with messages from colleagues and critics alike. Some expressed support for his stance, while others condemned him for disrupting the status quo. Even within his own companies, there were rumblings of discontent. Not everyone agreed with his new vision, and some employees began questioning whether the idealism that had driven his companies forward was now getting in the way of innovation. In the midst of this turmoil, Elon found himself standing at a crossroads. His vision for the future had always been clear: technology should serve humanity, not just profit. But the road to that future was becoming increasingly difficult to navigate. The very industry he had spent decades shaping now seemed determined to push back against his ideals. One evening, as Elon sat alone in his office at Tesla, looking over the city below, he reflected on his journey. He thought about the conversations he had had with his children, the people who had inspired him along the way, and the millions of individuals who had come together in the Humanity and Technology Project. He realized that this moment, the backlash, the skepticism, the resistance, was exactly what he had been preparing for. It was not the end of the road, but a test of his resolve. If he believed in the vision of a future where technology was integrated with purpose, then he had to be willing to face the opposition. He couldn't allow the commodification of his message to derail his mission. The world needed this conversation, even if it wasn't always comfortable. In a press conference a few days later, Elon addressed the controversy head-on. His message was clear: the fight for a better future wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be without setbacks. But it was a fight worth fighting. The future we're building is not just about making money or creating the next big tech gadget, he said, his voice calm but resolute. It's about ensuring that technology enhances human life and supports our values, not just our consumption. We can't allow purpose to be hijacked by those who seek to profit off of it. This isn't just about innovation, it's about ensuring that innovation serves humanity's deepest needs. The press conference was followed by an outpouring of support from individuals and organizations who shared Elon's vision. But there was also continued resistance, especially from the tech industry. It was clear that this was no longer just a debate about technology, it was a debate about the soul of progress itself. The weeks that followed Elon Musk's press conference felt like a whirlwind. The world had taken notice, and the stakes were higher than ever. He was no longer just a tech mogul building electric cars and rockets, he had become the center of a fierce ideological battle. His message, once a hopeful vision for the future, had now ignited a deep rift across industries, governments, and even his own teams. For some, he was a beacon of a new, enlightened age of innovation. For others, he had become a symbol of dangerous idealism that threatened the very fabric of capitalism. At Tesla and SpaceX, Elon's leadership was put to the test like never before. His teams were split. Some employees rallied behind him, inspired by the renewed focus on purpose and human-centered progress. Others, however, voiced frustration. They argued that the direction was muddled and that pursuing such lofty ideals could jeopardize the company's cutting-edge, high-performance culture. Elon spent sleepless nights pondering his next move. The fight was far from over, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation. He had spent years fostering a culture of radical innovation, yet now, it felt like that same culture was pulling him in different directions. He knew he couldn't just back down, but at the same time, he couldn't afford to lose the very people who had helped build his companies into the powerhouses they were today. It was during one of these sleepless nights that Elon received an unexpected phone call. The caller was none other than Dr. Olivia Hayes, a former professor of philosophy and ethics who had been one of the first to engage with him at the Global Summit in Geneva. She had become a vocal supporter of his cause, and they had kept in touch after the event. "Elon," Dr. Hayes began, her voice steady but concerned. "I've been following the backlash, and I can sense the strain it's putting on you. But you have to understand, you're not alone in this. There are more of us out here, more people who believe in what you're doing. You just have to be willing to trust that the path you're on is the right one." Elon listened intently, surprised by the depth of conviction in her voice. "But how do I move forward with all the resistance?" he asked, his voice heavy with doubt. "I thought people would be more open to the idea of purpose-driven innovation, but now, it feels like the entire industry is turning against me." "Resistance is inevitable, Elon," Dr. Hayes replied. "Change, especially the kind of change you're advocating for, doesn't happen overnight. But you've sparked something powerful. And as much as it seems like a fight now, you're planting the seeds for a new way of thinking, a new way of being. It's going to take time, but you'll see the fruits of it eventually." Elon paused, absorbing her words. Something about her calm demeanor brought a sense of clarity to his troubled mind. "I appreciate your support, Olivia," he said finally. "But I feel like I'm caught between two worlds. How do I reconcile these competing forces?" Dr. Hayes smiled over the phone. "You don't have to reconcile them. The key is to find balance between progress and purpose, ambition and humility. The future you're building doesn't have to look like anything that's come before it. Just remember, it's not about winning, it's about evolving." Armed with a renewed sense of purpose, Elon decided that it was time to rally his forces. If the world was going to follow the path of purpose-driven innovation, he would have to take a bold stand and ensure that his own companies led by example. He knew that there would be challenges along the way, but he also knew that the vision he had for the future was too important to abandon. He gathered his top executives at Tesla and SpaceX for a private meeting. The atmosphere in the room was tense, the air thick with uncertainty. Elon stood at the front, addressing his team with a calm but unwavering conviction. "We are at a crossroads," he began. "What we're doing here, what we've always done, is no longer enough. We can't just push forward for the sake of profit. We need to ask ourselves, what are we really building? Who are we building it for?" There was silence in the room. The executives exchanged glances, some clearly uncomfortable with the shift in tone, while others seemed intrigued. "I understand that this may be uncomfortable," Elon continued. "The path we're on is uncertain, but it's also necessary. We are building more than just cars and rockets. We are shaping the future of humanity. And we have a responsibility to ensure that future is one that benefits everyone, not just the privileged few." One of the senior engineers, Jack, stood up. "Elon, I respect your vision, but do you really think we can take on the world with this kind of approach? The industry is changing so fast. If we stop pushing innovation to the max, we risk falling behind." Elon nodded, acknowledging Jack's concern. "I know the pressure to innovate quickly. But we can't afford to sacrifice our values in the name of speed. If we lose sight of what matters, if we lose our sense of purpose, then we've already lost." Another executive, Maria, added, "You're asking us to go in a new direction. And honestly, I'm not sure the market is ready for it. This may cost us, Elon." "It will cost us," Elon admitted. "But I believe in what we're doing. And I believe in this team. I'm asking you to stay with me on this journey." There was a long pause, but then something remarkable happened. One by one, the executives nodded, some more reluctantly than others, but each acknowledging that this was a direction worth pursuing. Elon felt a surge of relief, knowing that he had their support. In the weeks that followed, Elon and his teams took bold steps to realign their companies with their mission. Tesla and SpaceX began releasing new products that not only pushed the boundaries of technology but also reflected the core values of the Humanity and Technology Project. They integrated more sustainable materials, introduced groundbreaking renewable energy solutions, and made strides toward creating tech that enhanced rather than exploited human life. At the same time, Elon's message of responsible progress continued to spread across the globe. He delivered speeches, wrote op-eds, and appeared on podcasts, reminding the world that technology could, and should, be a force for good. The backlash began to shift. While there were still critics, many people began to see the value in Elon's approach. It became clear that the future of innovation wasn't about cutting corners or chasing profits at all costs. It was about creating a world where technology worked hand in hand with humanity, a future where progress didn't come at the expense of what mattered most. Elon Musk stood on the stage at another global summit, this time with a new sense of resolve. His message had evolved, no longer just a call for technological advancement, but a call for purpose, ethics, and shared responsibility. The world had begun to listen. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but there was a growing sense that the future of innovation had a new guiding principle, one that balanced progress with purpose. "We are entering a new era," Elon said to the crowd, his voice steady and full of conviction. "An era where technology serves humanity. An era where our values shape our future. This is just the beginning. Together, we will build a better tomorrow." The crowd erupted in applause, and Elon smiled, knowing that while the journey ahead would be long and difficult, the fight for a better world had just begun. The journey that had begun in a lecture hall, with a single provocative confrontation, had grown into something much greater than Elon Musk had ever anticipated. As the years passed, the ripple effects of his confrontation with the atheist professor and the subsequent actions he had taken became the defining narrative of his career. What was once a debate about technology and faith had blossomed into a global movement, one that transcended industries, countries, and even ideologies. The idea that technology could and should be aligned with purpose had become a fundamental cornerstone in shaping the future. The world had begun to rethink what true progress meant. The very companies that had once rejected Elon's vision were now following his lead, some with genuine commitment, others more out of necessity, but the shift was undeniable. Elon had become more than a figurehead of innovation. He had become a symbol of what was possible when one dared to challenge the prevailing norms. Through perseverance, he had turned skepticism into acceptance, resistance into partnership. But despite the global influence he now commanded, it was clear that his work was far from done. The vision he had started with, an integration of technology, faith, and humanity, was still a work in progress. Years after the New York conference, the world had drastically changed. Technology no longer felt like an abstract tool to be exploited. It was seen as a living entity that had to be nurtured and guided by ethical considerations. The Humanity and Technology Project had birthed a new era in which the focus was no longer solely on technological growth but on how that growth could contribute to the greater good. Corporations, once driven by the bottom line, were now being held to higher standards. They were required to prove that their innovations served a greater purpose. Consumers, too, had shifted. The modern-day tech-savvy population no longer blindly embraced new gadgets and tools without considering the broader implications. There was a collective understanding that true progress could not come at the cost of the planet, human dignity, or ethical standards. Elon's influence extended far beyond the tech world. Governments across the globe had started introducing regulations that aligned with the values of the Humanity and Technology Project. Leaders who had once resisted Elon's ideas were now inviting him to sit at their tables to discuss future policies. Discussions around ethics in AI, privacy, climate change, and sustainability had taken center stage. The world was recalibrating, and Elon was at the heart of it. Despite the monumental success of the movement, Elon was not without his moments of doubt. Success had come at a high personal cost. The years of relentless pursuit had strained relationships with friends, family, and colleagues. His once unwavering commitment to pushing the boundaries of technology had given way to a more introspective reflection on the meaning of success. He had lost his mother, May, some years ago, a loss that still lingered in his heart. She had been one of his most significant influences, a guiding voice that had always reminded him that technology and innovation were tools to serve humanity, not to control it. Her words, "Purpose is the true measure of success," haunted him, but they also grounded him. At a private dinner one evening, Elon found himself sitting across from his children, who were now older and beginning to carve their own paths in the world. His eldest son, XAEA12, was studying at a university that blended technology and philosophy, while his younger children were developing their interests in sustainability and the arts. "You've done something incredible, Dad," his son said, a thoughtful look on his face. "You've changed the world." Elon smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I didn't change it alone. Many of us did it together. The real change came when we started asking what we were building, and for whom. Progress isn't just about technology, it's about the purpose behind it." His son nodded, understanding the weight of his words. They were no longer just the words of a father to his child. They were the principles that had guided Elon throughout his life, and now they were being passed on to the next generation. The torch had been passed. But even as the world changed, one last challenge remained. It came from an unexpected source, a new wave of intellectuals who saw Elon's movement as a betrayal of the true potential of technology. They argued that the very ethical framework he had championed was limiting progress, stifling the kind of radical innovation that could propel humanity to its next phase. These intellectuals claimed that the pursuit of purpose had become a distraction from the true promise of technology, a promise of limitless potential without moral constraints. Elon was invited to a global summit in Switzerland, where these new thinkers would present their case. It would be a final showdown of sorts. Was the integration of purpose with technology the future, or was it an unnecessary hindrance to the advancement of human potential? Elon stood at the podium, facing a packed audience of the brightest minds in the world. His speech began simply, but its message was powerful. "You're right about one thing," Elon said, addressing his critics directly. "Technology has limitless potential. But that potential is only valuable if it is used to elevate humanity, not enslave it. We are not simply building machines, we are building a future. And in that future, the question is not whether we can, but whether we should." The room fell silent. There were murmurs of agreement, but also a quiet tension. Elon continued, his voice steady. "What we create must serve a greater purpose. Progress without purpose is empty. We must ask ourselves, what are we really trying to build? And for whom?" In that moment, Elon understood that his legacy was not just about the innovations he had brought to life, but the philosophy he had instilled in others. He had not simply changed the world, he had changed the way people thought about progress. He had proven that technology could be a force for good, but only if it was rooted in something deeper than just advancement for its own sake. As the summit concluded, it became clear that Elon's movement had triumphed, not through brute force or sheer will, but through the power of ideas. His critics, though not fully convinced, had begun to acknowledge the validity of his perspective. The world was no longer at odds about the role of technology, it was working together to ensure that the future would be one where progress was guided by purpose. Elon Musk had, in his own way, fulfilled his mission. He had confronted the skeptics, challenged the norms, and proved that it was possible to build a future where humanity's values were as important as its technological capabilities. And as he looked to the future, Elon knew that the journey was far from over. The world had changed, but there was still so much more to be done. The true challenge, however, was not about what he could achieve, it was about inspiring the next generation to carry the torch and continue the work he had started. Elon Musk had become a symbol of possibility, not just through his inventions, but through his unwavering belief that purpose and progress could coexist. And as he stood at the precipice of a new era, he knew that the greatest advancements were yet to come, not in the machines, but in the hearts and minds of those who would carry his vision forward. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?